I couldn't wait. Hey, it's Romania Black. Yeah, I couldn't wait. Nah. See, I read chapters 58 and 59 yesterday. And I told everybody on Discord, I was like, look, I'm going to be out of town for a holiday. I'm actually out of town for business this coming weekend. And the following weekend, I'm out of town to visit family for holiday. So I was like, I need to record ahead. And I was like, I have a feeling I'm reading chapters 60 through 65. And it's a Saturday night as I'm recording this. And I'm like, I have a feeling this is going to take a while. Because not only do we have like 6 chapters that we're getting through in a chunk, but there was a lot to discuss with 2 chapters in the last section. So I just have a feeling it's going to take a long time to talk about these chapters. And so I wanted to give myself plenty of time. And I thought, you know what? Tonight's the night. There's no Manhwa chapter this week. I'm just going to go ahead and read these chapters and talk about them with you all. And then next week's video, I'll probably have to record early as well. So I'm probably going to not get to the Manhwa until we start volume 3, which is fine. So I planned it out. I've got chapters 60 through 65 this evening that we're going to look at. And then next week's video is going to be rounding out this volume, if you can believe it, with chapters 66 through 68. And I've been requested on Patreon to react to the Donghua Season 2 song that was in the trailer that I looked at a few weeks ago. So that's what I'm going to do next week. And then we'll start volume 3 with a Manhwa chapter and go from there. And probably by that point, I'm sure that for next week's section, I won't get it recorded until after Monday when I have comments from the previous parts. So I'll probably have some comments to talk about with the finishing up this volume. And then when we start volume 3, I'll have lots of comments because I will have been on vacation and will have seen your comments by then and will have been able to respond to them. So volume 3 will start out probably with a lot of comments about this volume. But yeah, we've got chapters 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, and 65, 6 chapters to get through. And the only thing I've been told at on Patreon is that it was a very big portion of the book that they put into one section. And so I actually have people on the Discord being like, I hope you read them all together. I am. So we ended last week's video with, it was kind of a cliffhanger, although I believe that it was just a miscommunication. And I think that Mu-Ching just didn't relay Shilian's message to the Goshi. And the Goshi's like, you didn't tell me. And Shilian's like, I thought we told you. And it was just going to be, I feel like it's going to get wrapped up really quickly. It's one of those cliffhangers that MXTX throws out at you, but then when you actually get to the next page, you're like, oh, it's nothing crazy. It's just a way for her to end the chapter. It's not anything like the cliffhanger that we had a few weeks ago. Nothing like that. Although, I don't know. There could be a cliffhanger in between this week and next week. I don't know. But there's no Manhwa chapter this week, so I poured myself some coffee. I was like, you know what? Let's do this. I'm so excited. And to have the opportunity to not have to wait, I get to binge for once. What? I'm gonna take advantage of it because it doesn't happen often. Usually with my schedule with recordings, I'll record Heaven Official's Blessing and it usually takes me a good solid week because I have other shows that I'm doing, but I've told myself, no, as much as I've got to get through tonight, I need to go ahead and record it. So for once, Romania gets to binge. With Heaven Official's Blessing. So I'm really excited, y'all. I haven't looked to see if we have a picture yet in this volume, though. I'll look after we're done reading. So I'm so excited. Let's do this. So we're going to start chapters 60 through 65 of Heaven Official's Blessing and part 17. And we will do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. I've got this book saved that when I open it up, it is right where I left off at, which is fun. So chapter 60, The Lost Red Pearl, Inadvertent Eyes Red with Desire. I know volume 3 back there has a pearl as the symbol, so maybe this is tied to it. Maybe the stuff that we introduced here is going to tie into volume 3. Perhaps. All right. Okay. And Feng-Shin. Okay, he did mention it a couple days ago. He's been putting a lot of thought into the heavenly procession and came up with the extraordinary idea of jumping off the tower to simulate the celestial descent without changing anything in the programming. His Highness was in the middle of rehearsals and couldn't get away, so he sent Mu-Ching to pass on the word to request the go-ahead. Oh, and then he looked over Muqing. Muqing returned and told His Highness that the Goshi had been informed. So, who knew he hadn't known and almost ruined the event? Who knew of this? So, yeah, why did Muqing withhold information? Oh, okay. He firmly believed Muqing to be sabotaging the affair purposefully. Okay. I think there's a misunderstanding. Oh, and Muqing just stared at him, his gaze going dark. Oh, is he tsundere because Shilian is standing up for him? Is that what it is? If he purposefully held back his word, once the event was over and we compared notes, his deceit would be revealed, and there'd be no way he could escape taking responsibility. He's not a short-sighted imbecile and wouldn't have come up with such a low tactic. Besides, with the God-pleasing martial warrior missing, what advantage does the ghost opponent have? Hear him out and then draw a conclusion. Okay. And then Shilian asks what happened. I did pass word on what His Highness bade me to say yesterday. We won't know ourselves what you did or did not say. When did you tell us? Yesterday, an hour after the evening lesson, when the four masters were resting at Sixshang Pavilion, this disciple spoke from outside the window. What were we doing then? Oh, the moment the question left his lips, he remembered his face turned blue from awkwardness. What were they doing? Just resting. Oh, the Holy Pavilion was a place of quiet meditation and training. There's very little entertainment, only some games that could be counted as amusement. One of them, the most popular, was playing cards. Cards could only be played in secret to be seen by no one. Goshi had long been bored out of their minds at the Holy Pavilion, and they were heavily addicted. When they started playing, they would forget everything and everyone and falling into a state akin to obsession or drunkenness, uncontrollably emotional and definitely not able to hear anything from outside. If he had said anything, how could they have heard? So, okay, they were so crazy playing cards that they didn't hear Muqing. Oh, maybe there were too many people and your voice was too low. We didn't hear clearly. Did you actually go to the pavilion yesterday? I absolutely did. He relayed the dress, look, and accent of the guard standing at the gate without fault. Oh, nice. You could have passed on the message to the trainee outside the door or enter the chamber and communicate in detail. Why speak outside the window? You didn't even confirm whether we heard. It's not like I didn't try. And he's replied softly. This disciple had begged the Shishong guarding the door, but for some reason he had to make things difficult and wouldn't let me into the chamber or pass on the word to me. His words were taunting and he booted me out. The disciple had no other choice. This disciple had no other choice. He's just prostrating himself there in that moment. So I went to the other side and tried to pass the message through the window. I heard one of the Goshi say, I understand, now leave. So this disciple had taken that as consent to His Highness's plan and returned. Oh, at the height of a round of card games, who would pay attention to whatever was said outside? If they should hear anything, of course they'd respond offhandedly with, I understand. But in reality, they didn't even know where the voice came from, so they weren't even paying attention. They were just like, yeah, go on. Oh, that such a thing would happen. Which trainee is this impudent? To be so disrespectful to one of my messengers, he's got guts. Oh. Although Shilian was usually kind and gentle when interacting with others at the Royal Holy Pavilion, he never put on airs, and was still nonetheless the esteemed son of the king, the prominent crown prince. And even as he knelt before the statue of God, he had not shown any meekness or timidness. In that moment of sternness, he was strong and authoritative without fury. Kind of like Junwoo a little bit. The Goshi wore unreadable expressions. Why didn't you report this to me when you returned yesterday? Your Highness, there's no need to look further into this matter with that, Shizhong. I didn't say anything after returning simply because I don't want to make this into a big deal. And seriously, it's nothing major. If your Highness has to defend me openly, it'll hurt the friendliness between everyone. What is this friendliness with everyone? The kind of friendliness you use to abuse others? Oh, at the end of the day, something like this happened because the Goshi disliked Muqing. The trainee attendants naturally followed their lead, and truly, Muqing himself wasn't that likable. It was often they not only did fellow trainees inconvenience him, they'd make things difficult for him at every turn. Yeah, okay. He wasn't trying to be sarcastic, but he did make a jab. But Feng Xin couldn't listen to another word and interjected. It really was nothing major, but you had to go make it complicated. If you had told the trainee at the door that you want to deliver a message to on His Royal Highness's command, would he still be brave enough to block your way? Also, right before we departed today, Goshi asked you where His Highness went. Why did you answer so vaguely? Couldn't you have said clearly that His Highness was on top of the tower waiting for the procession to start? Yeah, he didn't help him any. Yeah. I thought Goshi already knew and didn't expect to be asked that question, so I was confused. But right after I told His Highness, they said not to worry, and the procession could start without delay as planned. And His Highness, so he's like just covering his bases. Yeah, I didn't do this intentionally. Why was I being vague? And Feng Xin's like, well, you made it vague, so. But if he thought about it in detail, Mu Qing did indeed say what he did. Only Goshi was too anxious and didn't want to make hasty decisions. So if he must pick at faults, there really wasn't much to prove anything. And then Xi Lian's like, okay, it's an untimely misunderstanding. It's all just bad luck. So stop fighting. And Feng Xin just like, this is not, Mu Qing got away with this. Okay, so they're just going to let it go. All right. We'll discuss more on what's transpired and think of a way to save the situation. The three of you are dismissed. Go remove your costumes and do whatever else must be done. And of course, Xi Lian curtsied and rose to his feet. All right. Your Highness. Both His Majesty, the King, and Her Ladyship, the Queen, asked after you today. If you have time in the next few days, you should go see them. Next few days? You should go see them now. I understand. They traversed through a large part of the summit and returned to Shanla Palace Training Hall, built especially for the Crown Prince. And then he could remove his ceremonial garb. It was exceedingly strict in every detail, the garb that he was wearing. It could not ever be misarranged or mixed up. The outer robe was to be white, symbolizing divine purity. The inner garb was to be red, symbolizing canonical tradition. The golden crown that fastened to the hair symbolized royal power and wealth. White plumes hidden by the heart meant flight to ascension. Loose cordon ribbons among the sleeves meant to carry all lives, etc., etc. Okay. However, the esteemed prince... So it's like he didn't need to do anything himself. He only needed to stand and open his arms wide in that refreshing, fragrant chamber and chat with Feng Xin while waiting on his personal attendant Mu Qing to help remove layer after layer of this God-pleasing costume. So he talked with Feng Xin while Mu Qing removed the outfit. Okay. Mu Qing hadn't removed his black gear yet, his hands full with the God-pleasing costume he disrobed from Xi Lian. His fingers twitched, inconspicuously feeling up the material of that white robe. Kicking off his snow-white boots and waited for someone to bring him fresh clothes. He waited for a bit, but noticed Mu Qing wasn't moving. What's wrong? This costume seems to be dirty in some places. Bring it over and let me see. Sure enough, on the snow-white attire were two distinct little black handprints. It's probably from that little kid who fell from the sky. I remember he was grabbing onto me and wouldn't let go. His face was wrapped all over with bandages. Maybe he had tumbled elsewhere or something. Feng Xin, did you check him out? No. I took him out of the palace and was about to take a look at his face, as you asked, but he kicked me in the shin! It actually effing hurt! I mean, you feel over laughing. It's because you're so mean. Otherwise, how come he didn't kick me but kicked you? Yeah, it wasn't. It was like that damn kid was possessed or something and ran away right quick. Or else I would have picked him upside down and shook until he cried from fright. The kid must be a beggar. He's too dirty. Just a simple grab and he could leave black prints like these. Your Highness, the God-pleasing costume can't be dirty. Isn't that also a bad omen? 3 rounds around the capital. I've already got a good name going down in history with the best record. If it's dirty, it's dirty. Just wash it. I will do my best to be careful when I wash it. Oh, there's some tension there. Okay, all right. Oh, he's flipping through a book and he's seeing an illustration of a saber. Oh, Mu Qing, you fought well today on stage. Tsundere. Only today did I find out you're much more skilled with a saber than you are with a sword. Oh, really? Yeah, but you might have been too hasty. Swinging a saber is not like swinging a sword. Look here. The moment the topic shifted to martial arts, Shilian became highly enthusiastic, even more possessed than when the Goshi played cards. He jumped off the bed without even putting on shoes, demonstrating his point on the spot, using his hands as a pretend saber. Muqing wore a complicated expression. But after Shilian demonstrated a few moves, he started to watch seriously. Feng Xin, on the other hand, swung the now properly wrapped long saber and chased Shilian back onto the bed, shouting, "If you're going to show off, at least put your shoes on before you do. You're the crown prince, hair loose and bare feet. What a disgrace!" He was just at the height of his excitement when he got chased onto the bed like ducks to the pen and was rather bitter. All right, geez. Oh, that's weird. What is it? Okay. So, chapter 61, The Lost Red Pearl, Inadvertent Eyes Red with Desire 2. Oh, his earring's gone. The people of Shanli believed that the pinnacle of cultivation was the harmony of yin and yang, the unity of male and female. The form of the gods was inexhaustibly ever-changing and naturally unbound by gender restrictions, shifting to men or women as they willed. Thus, this belief was woven into the design of the god-pleasing costume. Throughout history, every god-pleasing martial warrior had donned adornments and accessories that possessed the form and details of both sexes, such as earrings, bracelets, and so on. When he was preparing for the role, he had pierced his ears and put on a pair of earrings. It was a pair of brilliantly deep red coral pearls, lustrous and smooth, radiant and opulent, rare and sublime. But when Shilian was combing through his hair, only one of the pair of red coral pearls was left. Oh. But the other two did not notice at all. Oh. His relaxed expression froze again. You're so scatterbrained, even something worn on your ears can be lost. I didn't find it in the pavilion in Shanli, so I'll go look out onto the roads. Oh. Maybe if that's the case, then there'd be no way to find it. If it's lost, it's lost. Oh, the pearl's too precious. We should try to look. Maybe rolled under the bed or a shelf. Why don't we call a few more hands to help? Crowds get handsy. We don't want people sneaking it in their pockets before we find anything. Okay. The broom in his hands broke in half. Ever since they left the great martial hall, Feng Xin was filled with complaints about Muqing. But the words never left his lips. Now that he saw Muqing blew up first, he got angry. Oh, okay. What are you doing, breaking things so suddenly? Who pissed you off now? Why don't you tell me straight what it is you want to say instead of casting shadows when there are none? I have nothing to do with the lost pearl. Oh, he thinks they think that he stole it. Why don't you tell that to yourself? What did I say? I didn't say you stole it, but you got all flustered. What, feeling guilty? Oh, that's enough. What? Don't misunderstand. Feng Xin's comments were offhanded, but he wasn't directing them at you. Oh. You don't keep your promises. No, you're wrong. Oh. What? Your Highness, you haven't even put on shoes. It'd be a disgrace going out with your hair down and in such a mess. Help me stop him. At least put your shoes on first and tie up your hair and leave him be. He's always weird like this. Who knows what nerve we touched now, going mental out of the blue. Oh. He wasn't going mental. You just accidentally said the wrong thing. What did I say wrong? I can't tell you. Anyway, you come with me to go find him and tell him it was all a misunderstanding and that you weren't accusing him of anything. What is it that you can't tell me? Oh. He didn't actually steal from you before, did he? No. Look, because he was guilty. Why? So when did he steal? Not so loud. Oh, so he did. Something like this had happened. You didn't tell me? Tell me now. It doesn't really count as stealing, but 2 years ago when I first entered the Royal Holy Pavilion, there was once I lost a leaf of gold foil. That time? Oh, like this was a big deal. 3 years ago, Shilian begged and pleaded in all manner of ways until his parents relented and permitted him to enter the Holy Royal Pavilion for training before the age of 20. A year later, the Pavilion of Shanla completed construction. Shilian could at last move in, and he did so with great excitement. When Shilian first moved in, he really didn't bring a lot with him. Only 2 carriages full of books and 200 treasure swords. Not that much. Just not that he didn't really bring a lot. Just 2 carriages full of books and 200 swords. Just your weekend travel bag. But the queen loved her son dearly and was afraid the training life would be too quiet and boring. So she later ordered for 20 servants and 4 large carriages full of trinkets the crown prince loved to be sent. Oh, he's a hoarder. That's why he's a scrap collector. He's a hoarder. Oh my God, no, it all makes sense. Okay. Included in this was a set of 108 leaves that make up the Golden Foil Palace. Oh, we're going back to this. Oh, building a palace out of gold foils was a popular game. And we're going back to this from Paradise Manor. To have so much luxury to enter the mountain caused a small wave of complaints. The Royal Holy Pavilion consisted of serious cultivators who weren't quite familiar with the prince's character just yet. And although they couldn't say much publicly, behind his back there was much chatter. Did he come to train or come to play? What could the son of the royal family cultivate if he only came for fun? Oh, it's only natural they should think this way. They'll know after a while that I'm not here to play games, and also who the number 1 in this generation of trainees is. However, not long after, something happened. Shilian was trying to send away as many of the 4 large carriages and servants the queen had gifted him as possible. When he counted inventory, he found that in the 108 leaves of gold foils, 1 was missing. That set of gold foils was packed in the carriages, and once at Mount Taisang, it had never left the pavilion of Shanla. If it wasn't lost on the road, then it had been stolen. Nothing was found on the road, so Shilian brought it up offhandedly to the Goshi. They became enraged at the idea that someone within the Holy Royal Pavilion would commit this crime under the allure of gold foils. They were determined to recover the gold leaf no matter what. So the punishment was going to be severe if they found them. All 3,000 and more disciples had to stop what they were doing and got dragged into forming teams to search room after room, chamber after chamber of every single training hall. It was a huge fanfare, tiring everyone out, yet unexpectedly, halfway through the search, Shilian suddenly corrected himself, apologized for causing everyone trouble, and said he suddenly remembered that he seemed to have already lost a leaf from the set of the gold foils when he was still at the royal palace, meaning there should have only been 107 total after all. So he lied on Mu Qing's behalf. It was complete chaos and utter pandemonium, and when everyone was sweating with exhaustion, to have His Highness the Crown Prince suddenly make such an announcement to never mind after all, it was inevitable for many to feel aggrieved. And thus, for the longest time, there was a lot of noise behind his back. Things like, well, he was the Crown Prince, so he got to call the shots. And hopefully next time his memory would be better. And remember the important things before calling an investigation and so on. And Fengxian was furious, but Shilian told him to let it go and let time pass quietly. And sure enough, he was able to change things around completely, rising to unashamedly become the number 1 trainee at the pavilion over all 3,000 and some disciples. Because he was truly friendly and easygoing and not at all dependent on his background, gradually his reputation improved amongst the others. He had forgotten this had happened, and now that it was brought up again, it dawned on him, and he was shocked and angry. It was Mu Qing who walked away with that gold foil. Shh. That gold foil leaf fell out of the rattling carriage while coming up the mountain. Mu Qing was passing by while carrying water and found it in the bushes. He kept it under his bed and hadn't figured out what to do with it. But that night, the Goshi suddenly struck. So he didn't know what to do, and then he was like, I found this, I didn't know what to do with it. Talking without telling is stealing. So you helped him bury this matter and told everyone the gold foil was lost. That's how it is. Oh. Do you know that when you first came to the Royal Holy Pavilion, just how many people talk shit about you? Keep it down. If he had said anything, his life here would be over. Our places in life are different, and we stand on different vantage points in this matter, so consequences can't be compared. Oh, okay. So he did. See, I told you to give it time. Now I get along with everyone, so who dare say anything bad about me? Oh my gosh, this is just, Oh my god! Okay. I felt it strange at the time, since I'd never known you two to have lost any leaves at the palace, Function said. But I can't believe you didn't tell me about this for 2 years, and that you even told me you met him when he was sweeping. Later, he asked me not to tell anyone. Since I agreed, of course, I wouldn't tell, not even you. But now that you know, I'm the one who went back on my word. But you mustn't tell anyone else. Oh, so Feng Shen says, how does that even count as going back on your word? It's not like you told me anything. It's his own guilty conscience making him freak out that gave him away. No, you promise me right now that this stops here. Otherwise, I'll break up my relationship with you and you'll be cursed to never find a wife. What? You break up with me? The day after our breakup, everyone in the kingdom of Shanla will know one thing. His Highness the Crown Prince fainted from overly tight suspenders while dressing himself. Fine, I won't say a word. Who gives a shit about gossip anyway? Oh, so maybe he wasn't afraid of women at the time? And so yeah, Mu Qing just thinks that Xilian told Function about it, but he didn't. The Royal Holy Pavilion had never lost anything before, meaning this was his first time. At the end of the day, it was for his mother. Anyway, he was, okay. He already assuredly promised that he would never do it again, so giving him another chance isn't wrong. And he kept his word. Besides, today when that little kid fell, if Mu Qing didn't cooperate with me, the parade wouldn't have ended so smoothly. Yes, very true. Oh my gosh. Feng Shen's trying to blame him for this, but Xilian says, I might have been indelicate too. If Mu Qing is disliked, I originally wanted him to run more errands for me and let people know that he's my personal attendant so they'd be nicer to him. I didn't realize they already were nasty to that point. Not only did things get messed up, he got bullied too. If you think about it from another angle, you'll find that his moodiness is understandable. But Function disagreed wholeheartedly. Why is it your fault that he's moody? You're the Crown Prince. How did you end up owing anyone anything for promoting him? Your Highness, I really don't understand why you think so highly of him. Rocks are everywhere, but precious jades are hard to come by. When it comes to martial arts, I've only ever seen 2 people who could be called jades. One is you, and the other him. The Twin Jades! The Twin Jades! Function and Mu Qing! Oh, I truly think that Mu Qing is extremely gifted. Such a precious jade. How could it be left to collect dust and hide its beauty just because of the background and temper? No, I think that's wrong. You ask why I think so highly of him. It's the same reason as why I think so highly of you. Ones that are destined to shine, I must let them shine. Besides, I don't believe that goodwill brings bad returns. Oh my God, there's so much to talk about. Oh my God. Oh, okay, the trainees are coming back by. Round chair. Oh, some cherries. Oh. It'd be funny if the pearl was in the midst of the cherries. The cherry woods atop Mount Taisang. Other than the abundant wild maples, there are many fruit trees, peaches, pears, oranges, and also cherries. Okay. And they offered them as tribute. The cherry trees stood row after row, and within fresh new leaves hung beads and beads of red pearl-like cherries, looking delightfully enticing. Xilian and Function walked for a while, looking for Mu Qing in the woods, but soon after, they heard quarreling voices coming from just ahead of them, ahead of where they were, and they unconsciously slowed to a stop. Oh, exciting! Okay. Oh boy. Okay. The Lost Red Pearl, Inadvertent Eyes Red with Desire 3. Ahead of them stood 4 or 5 white-robed trainees with a basket in hand, appearing to have come pick fruits. They weren't encircling any fruit trees, but rather a person. Oh, no wonder there seemed to be less fruit in the woods lately. It was someone who's been squatting and stealing. Oh, they can't be... The fruits grown on Mount Taisang can be picked by anyone who's a disciple, so how is it stealing? Besides, there's hundreds of thousands of fruit trees. There's no way there'd be less fruit by my power alone. And it was Mu Qing. Oh. Of course it was only you picking for yourself. The fruit wouldn't be noticeably less, but you didn't just pick for yourself, do you? You sneak them down the mountain for other people, exploiting the benefits. How shameless. Oh, the trainees who couldn't stand Mu Qing were picking on him again. Muqing came from a poor family. His mother, who lived at the foot of the mountain in the city, led a meager life. In the past, she could only make some money from seamstressing here and there, but after her eyes went bad, she could no longer do that work and could only wait for Muqing to bring home the money he'd earned from running errands on the mountain. Sometimes he would pick up some fresh fruit from Mount Taiseng to have her try, and it wasn't really anything major because there weren't any rules against it. Nonetheless, when spoken of out loud, it still sounded bad. To have it brought up like this was even more insulting and embarrassing. Zhu Shixiong. Oh, we usually rarely talk, but you've picked on me again and again. Yesterday, too, you wouldn't let me through the Sixshang Pavilion to pass on word. How have I offended you? So it's him. Yeah, okay, so it's him, the same one. The young man named Zhu was indeed the trainee that guarded the door. You're the one who wasn't mindful enough to do your job and almost botched the event. So why are you blaming me? Oh. He threw the basket to the ground as he griped, gesturing for everyone to go into attack. And Xi Lian, who couldn't watch anymore, said, "Stop." Oh, okay. Oh, but he grabbed Muqing by the shoulder and pushed him against the trunk of the tree. The brawl not yet started. If they really did start, even if it was 1 against 20, Muqing would have gained the upper hand. But if he wanted to stay in the Royal Holy Pavilion, then he must never raise his fist. What's everyone doing? As he smiles, he's like, what's everybody doing? What's going on? Okay. Oh, we were. Although I don't know why everyone's quarreling. Muqing is my personal attendant, so if he does anything, it's generally under my command. I didn't realize there was some offense in having him pick some fruit for me. He was taken aback when he heard Xi Lian saying him coming was under his command. He righted his collar and lowered his head and didn't speak. Okay, okay. And he's like, do you want some help? Your Highness. What is it? Why must you always show up at times like this? What do you mean? Is it wrong to come save you? Oh my God, Feng Xin, no, you missed it. What happened before was my fault. I didn't mean to accuse you, and everything was only said offhandedly. There's no need for you to think deeply about anything, suspecting this or that. I don't care for anything other than His Highness, and I'm not interested in gossip. That's all I have to say, so stop being moody. All right. Everything Feng Xin said is true. Let's forget anything happened. Nothing happened. I'll look for that red coral pearl again later. Maybe it was dropped on the street. It wouldn't be good for Xi Lian to look too much like he didn't care. So he replied, all right, only if you have the time. But if it was dropped in the streets, then it'll have gotten picked up by somebody by now. He didn't pick that many in the first place and moved to leave the woods. Xi Lian, however, saw many enticing fresh cherries and casually picked a bunch and dropped them into his basket. Next time you want to pick fruits for your mother, just say you're picking them under my command and no one will say anything. The Goshi told me to return to the palace for a few days, so I plan on leaving tomorrow. Why don't you make your visit down to the mountain too? Let's just head back for today. It took a while, but at last Muqing said in a quiet voice, thank you, Your Highness. On the next day, Xi Lian descended with Feng Xin and Muqing in tow. Okay. All right. They reached the foot of the mountain right outside the giant mountain gates, and they saw a shining golden carriage. A young man dressed in a collared brocade with a whip in hand was lying just in the front seat of the carriage, his legs crossed, looking lively and important. The second he saw Xi Lian, as soon as you say whip, I know who it is. Exiting the gates, he leapt to his feet and ran towards him in a mad dash, shouting in obvious joy, Cousin Crown Prince! Naturally, it was Qirong, and only he would have the free time to wait for Xi Lian at the foot of the mountain. My patience has finally paid off. Oh, he ruffled his hair! Oh, Xi Lian ruffling Qirong's little head! Did Qirong grow taller again? How'd you know I was returning? I didn't. I just waited, and I knew you'd come out sooner or later. I refused to believe you wouldn't. I'll find you. I think of that girl from Wedding Crashers. I didn't. I just waited. You're quite free, aren't you? Are you studying properly? What about sword practice? If Mother asks me to test your studies again, I won't help you. Oh, never mind all that. Look at my new carriage. Cousin Crown Prince, come and board it. Ride my carriage back to the palace. Oh, you're driving? Oh, they approached too. Technically, servants must sit at the front. But Qirong's face dropped immediately, cracking the whip in his hand. I asked Cousin Crown Prince to get on, but I didn't say you two. Think I'd let lowlives touch my golden carriage? Get the hell out of here. Oh, Qirong! Feng Shen had met Qirong many times before and already knew of his potty mouth and his vulgar and condescending character, but Mu Qing had never entered the palace before, so naturally he had never gotten the chance to go near Prince Shaojing. Qirong was feeling extremely aggrieved, but seeing Shilian about to walk away, he painfully and begrudgingly consented, the two shitty lowlives, to board the precious golden coach. Oh no. But they all regretted that decision. Qirong drove like a madman, the whip in his hand lashing nonstop, screaming who knows what, and the white horse neighed in shock. Oh! They almost crashed into a number of pedestrians and stalls. I want to see this animated! And thank goodness for Feng Shen and Mu Qing, who sat in the front and grabbed the reins to sidetrack the horse. Otherwise, the berserk journey was going to cost at least 20 lives. Oh my god. Oh, what do you think, Crown Prince? I drive pretty well, right? I'm going to tell Father and Mother to confiscate your coach. What? Oh my god. Regarding Shanla culture, 1, they loved gold. 2, they loved precious stones. 3, they loved beauties. 4, they loved music. And 5, they loved art. The Palace of Shanlei was thus the most distinguished place where all they loved coalesced. Traversing through the large courtyard, walking down the crimson hallway, not everything was gilded or built of jade, as there were also masterpiece paintings hung all around and soft music wafting in the air, creating the illusion of paradise. Okay. Mu Qing was in awe. Yeah, yet the more awed he was, the more careful he became, and the more he didn't dare have the others sense what he was feeling, and he didn't dare take the wrong step. Of course, Shilian went to meet with the queen straight away. Mama's boy! Mama's boy! The queen was resting at Qi Feng Manor, leaning on a small tea table, tasting new leaves. Okay, her eyes were crescent-shaped in joy. Oh my gosh. Feng Shen and Mu Qing stood guard outside. Shilian entered the chamber with Qirong in tow. Didn't I just visit 2 months ago? What a heartless child. Even wronger. Wronger! The word for son or child, but when added to a name, it becomes affectionate, akin to little or sonny. Even wronger knew how to keep an old woman like me company, but here you are, sounding all self-righteous when you haven't come home for 2 months. And how is Mother? Old. You look no more than 10-something. Like we're of the same generation. The queen was jubilant hearing those words of praise. Even if she had a son as old as Shilian, because of her status and wealth, she was very well maintained and looked the part of a noble beauty. Yet the words still left her lips with light admonishment. Flatterer. Oh. What is this? Oh, don't drink! You can't drink that! Oh, she's telling him he can't drink alcohol? Is that it? Okay. These chapters, y'all. Okay. Chapter 63. Why can't I drink this? Oh, she poured a bit of its contents in her handkerchief and pressed it gently a few times on her face. Mount Taiseng recently sent in a batch of fresh fruit. I don't like cherries, but there was a method of making it into a paste for facials, so I squeezed some for fun. There's not much use for it, and I was about to have it thrown out, so I can't possibly have you drink it. Oh. There were very few times in a year where Mu Qing's mother could taste cherries, and Mu Qing himself would get bullied just for trying to pick some. It was something of a sensitive topic, and Shilian was afraid Mu Qing would become uncomfortable listening to it, so he smiled and changed the subject. Yeah, okay. So what do we have to eat? Yeah, we're going to talk about this. Yeah, man, Saboy-yuld. Okay. The way you make it sound, others will think I starve you, but you've been a picky eater ever since you were young. I can't plump you up. You've gotten so thin since you entered the mountain. Today you'll eat whatever I tell you. No fuss. Okay. What's going to happen? Will you be punished? Oh, that wasn't Crown Prince's fault. The one who fell off the wall wasn't him. If anyone is punished, it should be that little fiend. What little fiend? Oh, okay. Oh. Okay. Who's the child next to Feng Shen? It's the first time I've seen another person by your side. This is Mu Qing. He was the one who played the ghost on the stage. Oh. Have him come so I can see his face. Feng Shen can come in too. Oh. I thought he fought rather well yesterday. A good, courteous child. Looking at his face, you'd think he'd be a gentle minister, but who knew he could be that tenacious using a saber? Right, I think he's really good too. Oh, the ghost from yesterday was him? Oh no. Oh, here, your reward. Oh! Qi-Rong, what are you doing? Oh, cousin, I'm helping you discipline an impudent servant. Before you made it yesterday, he surely was enjoying himself, taking in all the limelight. Who do you think you are, the star of the heavenly procession, gonna overthrow the heavens too? Wrong, what are you doing? Oh. Okay, don't let him hit anyone. Oh my God. Who do you think you are to have the effing nerve to touch me so casually? Oh my God. Sheila, you can feel his head aching! Qi-Rong, you're getting more and more out of control. Mother, I forgot to mention something. Please take away his golden carriage. Oh, no, why? That's Auntie's birthday gift to me! Oh my God! Oh, it has to be confiscated. We almost ran into trouble in the streets. Don't touch it until you can drive properly. Trouble? What trouble? Oh my God. Cousin Crown Prince is wrong. I didn't run into a single person. That's because someone stopped you. Oh. I'll talk to him tomorrow about confiscating his carriage. That child wanted a coach for the longest time. So when his birthday came around, I saw that he was still desperately wanting one, so I gifted it to him. Who knew it would turn out like this? Had I known, I wouldn't have given it to him. Why must he have a carriage? He said it was so he could go to Mount Tai-Seng any time to bring you home. It's better instead to find him a good teacher and restrain that temper. He can't keep going on like this. And what teacher can restrain him? He only ever listens to you. We could hardly have him enter the mountain to go cultivate with you. The ghost would die before taking him in as a disciple. Shilian found the idea both hilarious and horrifying, and shook his head. With a temper like that, if he should enter the Royal Holy Pavilion, he would raise hell for sure. Oh my God. Ah! Oh, they couldn't think of any ideas, so they let it go for the time being. Oh my God. Oh my God. Everyone knew the Crown Prince was deeply obsessed with cultivation, and ever since he entered the Royal Holy Pavilion, he visited his parents less and less. The king didn't say much on the matter, but the queen was always reluctant to see him go. Shilian casually strolled around the royal capital, accompanied Mu Qing to make a visit to his home, as suggested the day before. Gege is back. Oh, he was confused at first, wondering why they would call strangers Gege, but then he discovered that Gege, they weren't calling, it wasn't him, but Mu Qing. Oh. There's nothing this time. Don't call me anything. His face was wooden, but his voice wasn't cold. They're just kids from the block. Oh, Mu Qing, you tsundere! You secret softy! Shut up! Shut up! They were very comfortable around him. Oh, their dirty little hands extended, begging for munchies from Mu Qing. Finally, he reached for the gem-like cherries and handed them out. Oh. As if Mu Qing doing anything of that sort was a miracle. Feng Xin was astonished seeing this. Mu Qing had a pretty boy face that looked extremely selfish and cold-hearted, the type that, despite seeing someone die from starvation on the streets, would still keep a tight hold on his own food. But Shilian, on the other hand, wasn't surprised at all. At first, he had also wanted to find something to give the children, but he didn't usually carry sweets on his person. And having Feng Xin give coins, he didn't usually carry sweets on his person. Oh my God! And seeing, okay, and having Feng Xin give coins was too much like dismissing beggars. The Shilian didn't think it was appropriate. Suddenly there was a boom of galloping noise coming from the main streets, and a long shrieking whinny of a horse and people screaming. Oh no! Oh. The three of them stopped, and then Shilian rushed out of the alley. All around the main street was chaos. Stalls toppled and people on the ground. The pedestrians were all running to get away. Apples and pears rolled over. He hadn't figured out what was happening when he heard the crazed laughter of a young man. Out of my way, out of my way. I don't give a shit if any of you get trampled. Oh, it's Qi-Rong again. Sure enough. Qi-Rong stood atop the glamorous golden coach, his expression malicious, lashing his whip wildly, the white horse howling from the welting. Oh, stop him. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. He knows something was wrong. He whipped his head around, saw that just behind the large golden coach, something was being dragged along with a thick, long hemp rope. At the end of the rope was a gunny sack, and in that gunny sack there seemed to be something struggling. It looked like there was a person in it. Oh no. Oh, the white horse was dashing like it was running for its life, spinning the wheels of the carriage furiously. Feng Xin went to hold the horse back, but probably wouldn't be able to stop it immediately. Shi Lian raced up to the carriage only a few steps, unsheathed his sword and struck down. The rope snapped in two, and the gunny sack dropped to the ground, rolled, and came to a stop. Oh. Shi Lian bent forward to inspect it. The gunny sack had been dragged for who knows how long and was ripped from all the scraping. It was extremely dirty, covered in blood, and looked like a dead body bag. Oh. It was a child inside of it. Oh my God. Oh. The young child within it was curled into a ball, hugging his head tightly. His filthy clothes were covered in either giant footprints or fresh blood. He had been heavily beaten by someone, so much that he didn't even look human anymore. He was only 7 or 8, a very small creature, shaking as if a layer of his skin had been forcibly peeled off. It was truly incredible he was still alive after such a violent beating. He reached out a hand to feel his neck and found his pulse wasn't too weak, and sighed a breath of relief. Feng Xin, arrest Qi Rong. He could not believe that something like this could happen in the kingdom of Shanle. Under the light of day, on the main street, a member of nobility had stuffed a live human in a gunny sack to be dragged behind a coarse carriage. If he hadn't seen and stopped it, this small child would have been dragged to death that day. Oh my God, he'd been stopped. Is it Hua Chong? Oh my God, you effing loyal, lowly servant dare hurt me. Who gave you the balls? Oh. He couldn't stop him, so he tried to snatch the reins from him instead. Of course, Qi Rong wouldn't let him. So the two pulled back and forth, and in the moment of carelessness, Feng Xin bumped and pushed him off the carriage. He fell to the ground and rolled a few times. Oh. He felt nothing but rage and embarrassment. I did. Cousin Crown Prince, look what you've done, Qi Rong. He just then suddenly felt the child in his arm twitch, seeming to have loosened his hands, hugging his head, and was peeking at him from the gap between his elbows. How do you feel? Do you feel pain anywhere especially? The child was amazingly still conscious, not fainted from pain, not frozen in shock, and shook his head. Shi Lian saw that half of his bloody little face poked out and was about to check other head injuries, but the child firmly covered the other half of his face with his hands, refusing to show him. Because are the bandages gone? Can he see? Oh my God. Oh my God. What are we? What is this? This entire set has been madness. Oh my God. These chapters. Oh my God. Chapter 64. The Lost Red Pearl, Inadvertent Eyes, Red Eyes with Desire 5. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to do anything. I just want to check your injuries. One large obsidian eye, looking panicked. Is this not Hua Chong? This panic didn't seem like he was afraid to get beaten, but rather that something would be discovered. Looking at his little half face, half covered with only an eye, he thought he might have seen this child before. This little fiend ruined your grand ceremony yesterday, so I avenged you. Don't worry, I was careful. He won't die. Yeah, but my God, it's Hua Chong. Oh my God. The child hadn't changed. He was still wearing the same outfit as the day before, but because he had been beaten and drugged, he was filthier and looked nothing like he had before, not even like he was the same person. Who told you to avenge me? It has nothing to do with this child. It wasn't his fault. Of course it's his fault. If not for him, you wouldn't have gotten scolded by the Goshi. Oh my God. Mu Qing approached too, and Qi Rong pointed his whip at him, expression laced with hostility. And you, lowly servant! Just by the looks of him, I can tell he doesn't know his place. If you don't discipline him, sooner or later he's going to overthrow and step on you, the master. I helped you discipline him, but you turned around and defended him instead, and told on me too. Now uncle and auntie not only discarded my goodwill, they even confiscated my golden carriage. Cousin, that was my birthday gift. I've wanted it for over 2 years. Huh. I don't need your goodwill, not like this. Are you really avenging me, or are you avenging yourself? Oh, cousin, why would you say that to me? What have I done wrong in following after you? Qirong, listen here. From now on, you are not allowed to touch this child. Not a finger, do you hear me? Oh. In the height of his fury, he was startled. He looked down and saw the child had buried his face in his chest, his two hands tightly encircled around Shilian's neck. He felt him shaking uncontrollably and thought he was hurting. What's wrong? The child was covered all over in mud, grime, and blood, filthy and unkempt, and it all smeared onto Shilian's white robe. But Shilian didn't mind it at all. He patted the child's back to comfort him and said in a gentle voice, I'll go take you to the doctors right now. That child didn't respond, but he hugged Shilian even tighter. He was tense and he wouldn't let go, as if he was holding onto a lifeline. Qirong saw that Shilian wouldn't acknowledge his goodwill, his heart solely on outsiders. Then saw that the kid had sullied Shilian's robes with that bloody, muddy shit, and his anger flared. He raised the whip and was about to lash the back of the child's head. Oh! Feng Xin was standing on the side. In a split second, his legs flew out and he kicked Qirong right on the arm. There was a crack and Qirong screamed. His right arm dropped limply at an abnormal angle. He was frozen in disbelief, and it was a while before he slowly raised his head, glaring at Feng Xin, enunciating each word. You dare break my arm. Oh. It was only after he kicked that Feng Xin realized what he'd done and his face changed. But Mu Qing's face changed even more. It was no matter how much they detested Qirong behind his back, that was one thing. But as a personal guard, to have transgressed and accidentally broken the arm of royalty, that was something completely different. Just then, Shilian had his hands full with that child, and behind him was packed with onlookers, so he couldn't dodge, but if he had dodged, it would have been a piece of cake. Only Qirong came at him with such aggression, so out of the blue, Feng Xin moved too fast, and without thinking, Shilian didn't have the chance to stop him. Now everything was even more of an uproar, and Shilian didn't have time to think. His clothes were getting soaked in blood, and if they delayed any longer, the child might die just there. Shilian made a split-second decision, inhaled deeply, and shouted in a clear voice. Everyone, if anyone was pulled into this incident today, please record any damages and loss. I will take all responsibility without fail. He turned to Feng Xin and Mu Qing. Save the child first. Take Qirong away and don't let him continue havoc outside. He ran towards the palace with the child in his arms. Feng Xin received the command, his expression back to normal, and picked up the raging Qirong before following after Shilian. The soldiers guarding the palace gates thought it was strange to see the crown prince racing back, having only left a short while ago, but naturally they wouldn't stop him. Thus Shilian ran straight to the medical pavilion and entered the infirmary, leaving Feng Xin and Mu Qing outside the door with Qirong under arrest. The crown prince rarely returned to the palace and rarely made demands, so the imperial doctors naturally rushed over speedily. Oh, thanks in advance, everyone. That child was beaten by a number of adults, got stuffed into a gunny sack, and dragged onto the road. Please check in for me to see if there's any head injuries first. That's the most important thing. Oh. They'd never seen a royal or noble bring a dirty, wild babe for them to heal before. But they also knew they needed to do whatever they were told to, and they all acknowledged Shilian's direction. Put your hands down first, little kid. However, although that young child was docile in Shilian's arms the whole time, he started struggling then and firmly covered the right side of his face, refusing to let go no matter what. No matter how many skilled imperial doctors were, if the patient didn't cooperate, there was nothing they could do. They looked to Shilian. Your Highness, how? He's probably afraid of strangers. Don't worry, let me. The child was sitting in a chair and Shilian couldn't meet his eyes, so he bent forward and inclined his head. What's your name? The large eye of that child stared at him intently. His obsidian black pupil reflected a snow-white silhouette. This gaze, if it must be described, was exactly as Feng Xin had said, possessed by the devil, and shouldn't be the gaze of the child. It was a moment before the child lowered his head. Hong. His voice was tiny and soft, mumbled, as if he didn't want to say it, as if he was a little embarrassed. Shilian only sort of heard the word Hong and asked again, How old are you? 10. He was only asking offhandedly, hoping to lower his guard, but hearing that he responded with 10, he was startled. I thought he was only 7 or 8, but 10. This child is truly weak and emaciated. The doctors will see to your wounds now, so don't be afraid and lower your hands, okay? Why not? Ugly. His response was just the one word, and no matter how Shilian soothed, he refused to remove his hands. Shi Lian promised he wouldn't think of him ugly, that he wouldn't look. Turning around wouldn't do either. Such a young age, such obstinance. Without much choice, the Imperial doctors could only ask him a few questions, have him recognize a number of fingers, make sure he didn't feel faint or have any headaches, and make sure he understood what he saw and what he thought, and tend to his physical wounds. As the Imperial doctor worked, they became more and more awed. Shi Lian guarded on the side, and hearing their sounds of wonder, he asked, "How is he, everyone?" "Your Highness, did this little kid really get beaten and dragged on the roads in a gunny sack?" "Why should that be false?" "If that were the case, amazing. I've never seen anyone so tenacious." "He has 5 broken ribs and a broken leg. A number of injuries, big and small. Even with all those added together, he remained conscious and converses while sitting up. Even adults would find this difficult, never mind a 10-year-old child." Hong is the word for red. Hearing how severe the injuries were, Shi Lian became even more furious at Qirong. He looked at the child and saw he was sitting there on that chair and felt no pain, and was peeking at him with that large black eye. When he noticed he was caught staring by Shi Lian, he turned his head away. We have one chapter left. We've got one chapter left. Okay. Last chapter, chapter 65. Seeing this, Shi Lian thought he was both silly and pitiful. Then turned to ask, "Will his injuries heal?" "Not a problem. You wrapped a new layer of bandages around that child's head. Thank you for all your hard work." Okay. Oof. He told the child to lie down a bit. He then thought the child was afraid of strangers and so many people crowding in might scare him, so Shi Lian lowered the bedside curtains before rising to his feet. Okay. Oh, be at ease. I wasn't hurt. It was someone else who was wounded. "Auntie, save me!" Oh my god. Qirong is ridiculous. Oh my god. Oh my god. She was only worried about the well-being of her son and completely ignored everything else, but now that she saw, she asked, "Wrong heir, what happened?" "Feng Xin, why are you holding Prince Shaojing like a criminal?" Oh, the king said that. Oh, when His Majesty arrived, Feng Xin should have bowed in greeting like Mu Qing and all the others, but because he had Qirong in hand, he couldn't let go and thus entered into an awkward situation. "It was under my command," Shi Lian said. "Auntie, my arm is broken." Oh. She hadn't had the chance to sympathize before Shi Lian cut in harshly. "You broke an arm, but what about that child?" "What child?" "A 10-year-old child, powerless, vulnerable, and already weak. Qirong sent his lackeys to beat him. If not for his tenacity, he would have been beaten to death on the spot." Oh. A powerless, vulnerable 10-year-old child. Weak. Cousin, you don't know how vicious, how savage, how spunky that little fiend was. He only pretends to be pathetic in front of you. I called 5 or 6 guys, and they still couldn't catch the brat. He thrashed and bit them until they were bloodied all over. If he didn't anger me, why would I have drug him behind the horse carriage?" Oh. Enough. Do you think what you've done is impressive? Qirong wasn't one to shy away from showing his face. He was so arrogant and ostentatious, there was no reason the citizens of the capital did not see him. After they had seen, there was no reason why he wouldn't become the talk of the city as after-meal leisure. The king gave the queen a look, his expression slightly blue. "Take Prince Shaojing away. Doctor, see to his arm. The golden carriage will be permanently confiscated. You are to be detained and reflect on your actions for a month without release." Oh. Qirong no longer cared and humphed. Take it. I already knew today would have been the last chance to drive it." Hearing that he possessed no repenting heart, the queen sighed sadly, and Shi Lian spoke up. "Looks like with only a month of detention to reflect, he will still do this again next time. There needs to be stricter discipline." "Cousin Crown Prince, you..." "Fine, then I admit, this time it was my fault. No matter how this Majesty punished me, Qirong has no complaints." Oh, however, Cousin Crown Prince's servant, shouldn't he also be punished? "Auntie, uncle, my arm was broken by Feng Xin." The king instantly moved his gaze to Feng Xin, looking outraged. Feng Xin lowered his head and Mu Qing inconspicuously moved 2 steps away. Feng Xin, you are the Crown Prince's bodyguard. The Crown Prince treats you well and regards you highly, but have you forgotten your own place? What is this arrogance? Your duty is to serve His Highness. And this is how you serve him? You dare raise a hand against the crown prince's cousin, Prince Xiaojing? He was ready to kneel, but Xilian stopped him. Don't kneel. Oh, he obeyed Xilian's command first and foremost, even under the king's orders. His priority was his highness, and so he instantly straightened again. The king became even more upset. It's true Feng Xin broke Qirong's arm, but the reason was to protect the master, Xilian said. Besides, Qirong was at fault first, not Feng Xin, so why must he kneel? It doesn't matter why. Either way, he has offended Prince Xiaojing. There's a difference between masters and servants, a distinction of superior and inferior. Never mind if I, the king, was to make him kneel. If I were to punish him with 100 lashings, there wouldn't be anything inappropriate about it. Although the king wasn't as affectionate towards Qirong as the queen was, Qirong was still nevertheless of the royal household, never to be disobeyed or offended. Qirong knew this very well and said with a sidelong glance, "No need for a lashing punishment. He belongs to the crown prince. I don't want to make things awkward. As long as he breaks his own arm and kneels to kowtow before me 3 times, I can let this go." The king nodded slowly, looking to consent on the decision. However, Xilian spoke up. "If you must punish Feng Xin, then you must punish me first. He's my servant, first of all. He's done nothing wrong. And second of all, if he was at fault, it was still under my orders, so I will take punishment on his behalf." All fathers and sons in the world must go through this change. When the son was young, they would all idolize their fathers as the greatest hero on earth, their own personal role model, their worship a parent. However, when the son matured to a certain age, they would start to question everything the father did, even brew revulsion, until in the end, neither side would acknowledge each other. To enter Mount Taisang for training, Xilian's fundamental objective was to improve his martial arts and search for the direction of his heart. However, he never cared for where he trained, nor with what identity. The word Dao for cultivation meant exactly as it appeared, which was to walk the path. As long as one's heart was set on the path with one mind, when the training could be done anywhere, he didn't need to follow any dictated norms, nor enter the royal holy pavilion, but there was another reason why Xilian had begged to train on Mount Taisang, and that was because he felt he really didn't get along with his father. As the honorable crown prince of Shanle, the moment Xilian was born, the king of Shanle had already drawn out every detail of the path of his life. It was all right when he was still young. A child had few worries, and Xilian only needed his parents to build gold foil palaces with him, to play around and laugh. But as the years went by, Xilian felt more and more that his father wasn't only a father, but also the ruler of a kingdom, and many of their thoughts and actions could no longer concur. For example, the so-called royal prestige was one of the things that Xilian hated. If they couldn't agree, it was best to stay far away. Every time he returned to the palace, he spent more time conversing with his mother and never had any heart-to-heart moments with his father. The two never took the initiative to talk to each other either, and it was also the queen who always mediated between them. "Ah, very well. Take his place if you must. Let's see if you can actually withstand it." "Of course I can. Why must it be like this?" says the queen. And just then Feng Xin, who hadn't spoken a word, raised his left arm and struck down on his right. There was a crack, and the crowd startled and looked to the sound and saw that his right arm dropped limply, just like Qirong's. Xilian was shocked and furious. Feng Xin. And he kowtowed 3 times in front of Qirong. Qirong felt rather proud and laughed out loud. "All right, I guess I'll forgive you. Why couldn't you have done this earlier?" He looked, even though his arm was broken too. When he left, he looked energized and refreshed, as if he had fought a winning battle. As for Feng Xin, he was still kneeling on the ground, and Mu Qing stood on the sidelines watching, his expression gloomy but his thoughts unreadable. Your Highness!" The queen also put her hands on him to pull him back. Xilian knew that Feng Xin had followed him since the age of 14 and was cared for deeply by the queen. He only did this because he couldn't bear to see the queen sad over the dispute between his father and son. Oh, if Xilian threw a fit now, then Feng Xin's efforts would go to waste. So he swallowed his outrage, but the fire continued to burn in his heart. The king finally looked appeased and left with a grim expression. The queen had always liked Feng Xin. "My child, we've wronged you. Please don't say that, Your Majesty. This is my duty." Muqing snorted coldly. Mother, if you can't really handle Qirong, then lock him up. Function, I'm sorry. Once the crowds had cleared, Function immediately changed face and clicked his tongue. This is nothing. I dared hit him, so how could I be scared of his revenge? Your Highness, of course it's right for you to discipline Qirong, but don't be resentful of His Majesty. His Majesty is the king and a figurehead of the older generation, so he thinks differently than we do. Seeing you two fight makes the queen sad. She has her difficulties too. How could Shilian not know of his mother's difficulties? The mother of Qirong was the younger blood sister of the queen, and they got along very well. When she was young and immature, at the first bloom of romance, she thirsted for freedom, listened to the words of honey, and broke off a good engagement to elope with a bodyguard in the palace. Who knew the one she had chosen was villainous? One who was born of nobility was stuffed into a doghouse-like shack, and after only half a year, the villain revealed his true nature, drunken and violent. After Qirong was born, he became even more abusive. Finally, the mother couldn't take it anymore, and when Qirong turned 5, she took him and ran from home. Because she had become a royal scandal, she closed the door and no longer stepped foot outside. She spent the rest of her life in grim depression, only showing particular love and devotion to her only son. During an upheaval, Qirong's mother lost her life saving the queen. And before she passed, she asked Shilian's mother to look after Qirong. And the queen did her utmost. It was still awkward raising someone else's son. Discipline was difficult. Too strict, and it appeared to be abuse. Thinking of past love and friendship, she could only be so harsh. Too lax, and it turned out to become the behavior we've seen today. And without stricter restraints, it could only get worse in the future. The queen also wondered often. She raised Shilian and Qirong almost the same. So why were their characters so different? Just then, she remembered there was a small child lying on the bed of the infirmary. Oh my God. And the child was sitting up, looking like he was trying to peek out of some crack to watch. The moment Shilian raised the curtain, he lay down obediently. Did we scare you at the fight just now? Don't let it bother you. It has nothing to do with you. Your Highness, the little kid's wounds have been tended to. Now he only needs quiet rest, one of the doctors said. Thank you for your hard work. Where do you live? I'll take you home. The child shook his head. No home. No home? So he really is a little beggar. Seeing that the child was emaciated and small, his clothes filthy and unkempt, it wasn't impossible. If he had no home to return to, they couldn't possibly leave him at the palace or throw him out onto the streets. He pondered a moment. Well, if that's the case, let's bring him back with us to Mount Tai Sang. But Muqing spoke up. He's lying. What? What? No! 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 Not Muqing! Muqing, why are you the source of these cliffhangers? Oh my God. Oh! Okay. 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 Well, I guess as far as where we start, we need to go back to the beginning and unravel all this. I had to pour myself another cup of coffee for this one. Oh my God! What? What even, MXTX? You know what I love? You know what I love about this story so far? It is so different from Odazushi. So different. It could not be more different. And in so many ways, shapes, or forms. And Huckleberry's like, you've been reading for an hour. You need to come and you need to come and throw the ball now. I'm so shocked because I went into this series, honestly, full-blown expecting there to be so many similarities to Odazushi. And I was like, I don't know. It'll probably be kind of similar. No, it's totally different. I'm like, it doesn't feel like the same style of writing even. I'm like, MXTX, how do you do this? How do you change you're like a damn chameleon. How do you change your writing to be like so different than Odazushi? And it really became apparent with the parents, with the king and queen, just how different, because the king and queen, Shilian's parents, that we don't have a name for, are polar opposite of Wushin and Chang's parents. Polar opposite. Absolutely opposite. There are similarities with MXTX's writing in terms of like the gossip and in terms of we'll talk about a few characters and how they're similar, but because I get a little bit of like, it's weird. I'm gonna move this white raccoon over a little bit. I get a little bit of like Yao vibes with Muqing, but then I also get that kind of with Qirong, and so not really Yao in Murata Azushi is a totally different character, but I'm just floored by how different the writing is. I'm just floored, and if you had told me that we were going to do a flashback, I would not have been able to predict anything that has happened in these chapters. Nothing. Didn't predict Qirong with a golden carriage driving like a madman through the streets. Him and Hua Chong's relationship. Oh my God. It's just, oh my God. Hua Chong has taken things very well, considering what Qirong did to him. Hua Chong has had a great mindset. Qirong just calling him trash. But then again, Hua Chong has had 800 years to get over that fact. And Hua Chong doesn't seem, I don't know, does Hua Chong seem like the type that holds a grudge? He seems like the type that he doesn't hold a grudge, but once you've made him mad and he has nothing to do with you, you're just done. He's just done with you. And it's like, bye. He doesn't seem like he holds a grudge, but once he's over with you, he's over with you. But oh my God. I honestly don't know where to begin with these chapters, because there's not only, I took like a page and page and page and page of notes. I took a lot of notes. I was like, oh, how long is this going to take? Huckleberry's like, long enough for you to throw this dang ball. I don't even know where to start. So I think really there's a lot of themes going on in these chapters. We find out a lot about Muqing and Feng Xin. A lot about them. We find out a lot about Xi Lian. We find out a bit about Qirong that's not too surprising, but we do find information about there. And then I remember, a couple chapters ago, I was like, man, Xi Lian doesn't really have a good relationship with his dad, does he? No, he doesn't. No. And I'm kind of like putting my foot in my mouth because I'm like, man, Hua Chong's kind of like Xi Lian's dad. No, he's not. So there is a big difference there. And then Hong, or Hua Chong, Hong, which means red, is the name of the child. And I don't want to call Hua Chong Hong because that was his human name. That was his name as a kid, if that was his name. And he was 10 years old. So there's only 7 years difference between him and Xi Lian. Only 7 years. Okay, maybe even less than that. Maybe 6 or 7 years. So not that crazy, right? It's like Yuri on Ice. It's like Yuri and Victor Crush level age range. We're going there. That works perfect, right? It's great. But like, there's just so much to talk about with these chapters. There's so much to talk about. I guess maybe the sensible thing to do would be to go chapter by chapter, because there's 6 chapters. Maybe the thing to do would be go chapter by chapter. That might be the most reasonable and chronologically sane thing to do. So let's just do that. We'll just start out with chapter 60 and go from there and talk about all the things that happen in that chapter that are noteworthy. So yeah, just like before we do that though, again, there's so much to talk about. I do want to say that the chapter title, we got 2 images in this set of chapters though, which I'm really excited about. These set of chapters are called Lost Red Pearl Inadvertently Luring the Red-Eyed. And the red-eyed, it says, means eyes red with envy. And it's an idiom that indicates jealousy, similar to the English idiom green with envy. So if you're in English, the English idiom is that you're green with envy. And usually green eyes are associated with jealousy. Which is why we met Qirong. I was like, oh, well, he's themed with green. That must mean envy. But here it's red with envy. Well, envy is, if you're tying red to it, that's Hua Chong. So interesting. Very curious, right? And we'll talk about the red pearl. The red pearl, right? There's a big cool thing with that's going on in chapter 61. We'll deal with that then. But man, Xi Lian, we're getting so much on Xi Lian's backstory, and he is becoming such a fleshed out character that has so many layers to him. And that's kind of one of the things that's very different from Murata Azushi is that with Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian, we do get a lot with them. We do. And especially Wei Wuxian, we get a lot of layers with him, but Shi Lien is a damn fleshed out character. He is extremely fleshed out. And we're not even 2 volumes into this. And I'm already like, I feel like I know his character so well. And we still have like 700 years worth of content we've not touched on with this character. So I'm like, holy shit, where do we... MXTX, your magnum opus, right? So yeah, so we basically have the idea of the red, of the color red, tying to not only envy, but tying to the cherries and tying to the pearl, the missing pearl. Now, I think that Hua Chong or Hong stole the pearl. I think Hua Chong stole it. I think he took it when he had his arms around Shi Lian's neck. He probably thought he'd never see Shi Lian again after he saved him, and so he stole the pearl as like a memento, as a keepsake. He stole it to keep for himself. That's what I think. I think he stole the pearl. I also think that's why it's the little gem that's on volume 3. Maybe in volume 3 we'll find out the reveal that he took the pearl. I don't know. I don't want any spoilers. We'll find out, right? So, but yeah, so chapter 60, my notes on it. I feel like I took a little bit of notes, and then as the chapters went on, I took more and more notes. I was just like, but in any case, chapter 60, we find out that it was in fact a misunderstanding, surprising no one, that it turns out that in this Royal Holy Pavilion, which I had a little bit of a dyslexic moment. I kept saying Holy Royal Pavilion. Royal Holy Pavilion. I notice that I do that a lot when I read out loud. I do kind of mix words up. I am not dyslexic, but it does happen occasionally. So we have the Royal Holy Pavilion, and within it there's this concept that the Goshi aren't really serious with their job. They're not really hardcore martial artists, it seems. They get rather bored, in fact. And they've been doing it for he said he's been doing it for like 30 years. So you kind of get the idea. But the Goshi get bored and they play card games. They play card games at the pavilion, which you would think at the Royal Holy Pavilion, that's where the big statue of Junwu is, you think that'd be a big no-no. But since they're the Goshi and the deputies, they get away with it. So they're just playing cards. And it says in the text they get like ravenous playing it. And you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the Gambler's Den in Ghost City is what it reminded me of, is that they get so raptured with the gambling and everything that they forget everything else. Like, it reminded me of the dad in the gambling den that gets so caught up in the gambling that he gambles his child's life away. Like, it reminded me of that. So I thought that was a kind of a cool connection between them getting so caught up in the gambling and the Gambler's Den in the Ghost City, which is curious because we're tying it back to Hua Chong, who maybe he'll go to Mount Taiseng, maybe he won't. Mu Qing thinks he's a liar at the end of this, that he's not homeless, so we'll talk about that later when we get to it. But Mu Qing went to go tell them the message from Shi Lien, and they were like, oh yeah, we heard you, and then they didn't hear him, and then it was just a big misunderstanding. But it wasn't just that. It was the fact that the guard, who we will later know is named Zhu, he kind of taunted Mu Qing. He taunted Mu Qing a bit, and Mu Qing kind of just didn't want to mess with it, so he just left. He was like, forget that. And so he kind of just sauntered himself off. Now, Mu Qing, we established, is pretty much a tsundere. Very much a tsundere. And so we actually learned quite a bit about Mu Qing, which I like. I like that we learned that about him. So we learned that Mu Qing, he's kind of a tsundere. And he's not on board with Shi Lien defending him so much. I get the impression that Mu Qing does not want to be in Shi Lian's debt. He does not want to seem like he needs Shi Lian's help. He already is kind of tangled up in this situation with Shi Lien because of something he's done, kind of against his will, and because of something Shi Lian's helped him with. So he doesn't want to owe Shi Lien any more than that. Which I don't blame Mu Qing for, because it's like, I wouldn't want to be in somebody's debt either, especially if it was avoidable. Right? And so Mu Qing's just kind of like, he just doesn't want Shi Lien defending him. And Shi Lien, originally Shi Lien wants to call out the guard. He's like, well, who's the guard? Let's take care of this now. Shi Lien wants to get things, you know, set straight. And Mu Qing's like, we don't have to do this. And then Feng Xin is like, why did we even start this? Feng Xin is like, no nonsense. Feng Xin is like, let's avoid the drama. He's like, why did this even happen? And Feng Xin, he kind of calls Mu Qing out. He's like, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you speak up when the Goshi asked where Shilian was? Why didn't you explain yourself more? So Feng Xin, he's very much no nonsense and is to the point and blunt. Mu Qing is a little bit more complicated than that, and a little bit more like he has kind of ulterior motives. And Mu Qing even says, he's like, well, I didn't realize that I was misunderstood, for one. And then he says, I didn't want to bring it up in front of the parade and get everybody all riled up because that would just stir up more trouble. And he's like, I knew Shilian was going to come down and I trusted he trusted Shilian. That's the thing. And he knew he was going to show up, so why make a big deal about it? Mu Qing's like, I trusted Shilian. I knew he'd do fine. So it's funny that we have both Feng Xin and Mu Qing, that they both trust Shilian. They just have very different ways of vocalizing it. Right? And at the time, Shilian even calls out saying, well, the Goshi was too anxious in the moment. He just probably didn't think anything correctly. And it was just in the moment, everything was chaos. And it all worked out in the end. Shilian chalks it up to just bad luck. Right? So it's cool. It's not cool. But it's interesting that we have right off the bat here Shilian chalking up to bad luck. Which is funny because at first in this, I would think that maybe Hua Chong has been the cause of some of Shilian's bad luck. But Hua Chong wasn't even there at the start before all this happened. So we can't really blame the things happening that were bad luck for Shilian on Hua Chong. It was just the bad luck was already occurring. So that's fascinating. But yeah, he just says, let's chalk it up to bad luck. And so the Goshi tells, this was another thing that I was kind of really sad about, is the Goshi, he tells Shilian, he's like, hey, don't forget to visit your parents. You haven't seen them in you need to visit them within a few days. And Shilian, he has to be told to visit his parents. We come to find out it's been 2 months since he's visited them. But at the time, Shilian's like, yeah, I'll go see him. How the tables have turned, right? He went from barely seeing his parents within a couple months to freaking out when he finds out that he can't see his mother anymore. Like, it's one of those, you don't know what you've got till it's gone scenarios where he took for granted his parents and being there for him. And then once they were gone, then he lamented it, right? So that's really, really sad. And so we find out that the actual attire, that the ceremonial stuff has lots of meaning. There's lots of meaning surrounding it. Like the outer robe means it's divine purity. The inner garb is red for canonical tradition. The gold crown symbolizes power and wealth. The plumage inside symbolizes the flight to ascension. And then the ribbons on the sleeves mean to carry all lives. Everything has a meaning. It's all very symbolic, traditional, and ceremonious. But Shilian, again, talking about how different he is, Shilian, he has Mu Qing disrobe him while he's talking to Feng Xin. Like, how different things are back then. Like the idea that Shilian, this guy who with the Windmaster was crawling through mud and feces like it was nothing, didn't even disrobe himself as the crown prince. He had Mu Qing do it for him. And Mu Qing didn't even get the chance to disrobe himself from his ghost gear. He had to disrobe Shilian while wearing the ghost gear and take it and go wash it. Like just how different Shilian was and how spoiled and privileged he was, and didn't even think two things about it, right? He just takes it off like it's no big deal. And so it's interesting that Mu Qing, there's a little moment there where Mu Qing, he doesn't argue or seem like he's upset that he has to clean Shilian's robes, but there's a moment where he feels of the fabric. Like you get these little tiny hints that Mu Qing has grown up poor and he's not grown up with these finer things. So like when he's holding the and that was the thing I talked about in the reaction. Shilian, they talk about it's 50 pounds worth of robes, 50 pounds worth of this ornate fabric that probably took so much money and time to craft. And you have Mu Qing who comes from the slums, who is like just feeling the fabric and all. And Shilian just rips it off his body like, get this stuff off of me. And it's like clothing that could robe a village, basically. And he just takes it for granted, right? And Mu Qing, feeling of the material, ends up finding, he finds the black handprints on there. The black handprints from the beggar child. And that's telling, too, that little tiny detail that Hong, as we come to find out, which is Hua Chong, a.k.a., that the fact of the black handprints, right? That his hands were so dirty that they left stains on his clothes. Like that's bad. Like he's so dirty that he left like marks and stains on his robes. And you know, Xi Lian is like, oh yeah, that kid, like Feng Xin, didn't you take care of him? And I love that Feng Xin's like, yeah, the little shit kicked me in the shin. I just, there's a part here, it's very interesting, but the part here where Feng Xin is like saying that Hua Chong kicked him in the shin, like just to get away. It's great. It's hilarious. I'm like, oh my God. But yeah, it's funny that we have all these moments, oddly enough, with Hong and Feng Xin, and then we go back a few chapters before where, and Feng Xin has no clue. Xi Lian and Feng Xin do not know that Hua Chong is this little kid. So when Feng Xin's like, well, what, you think you could do it? And then Hua Chong just makes it rain blood. It also ties to the fact that we know from Volume 1 that Hua Chong has fought Feng Xin and Mu Qing several times, and they were around when they first met him. Small world, right? It's just absolutely crazy. But Feng Xin believes that it could be a bad omen to have dirt on the robes, and Xi Lian's not worried about it. He's like, bad omens? Like, it's like, you're being superstitious. Like, Mu Qing, just go clean that. Well, as dirty as dirty, it's fine. It's okay. And he just tells Mu Qing to watch it. And Mu Qing is very careful when he's like, yes, I'll be very careful to watch it. Almost like Mu Qing doesn't want any of the bad luck to rub off on himself. Is kind of how he feels. Because, yeah, he's like, it's just chalk it up to bad luck. Like, just the robes being dirty, he doesn't think is an omen. He's like, nah. He's like, I don't believe that. Which is kind of funny, because you go from Xi Lian not believing in the omens at all to suddenly being like, well, I'm nothing but bad luck. It's like, 700 years will do that, right? And so at the same time, though, when he's telling, it's almost like Xi Lian tells him to go clean the robes, but then as he's leaving, he's like, oh yeah, by the way, you were really good with a saber. And so Xi Lian hints that he has his love of swordsmanship with Mu Qing, right? He talks to Mu Qing about the love of swordsmanship, and he's like, oh, he's like, you were really good with that saber, but he's like, you weren't holding it right. You got to do this. And he gets all excited. And he was even looking at a magazine that, like, he was looking at like a Sports Illustrated, but it was for swords. It was like Swords Illustrated was the magazine he was looking at. And he's like, oh, let me tell you about this. Like, Xi Lian gets so excited about the swords and tries to like teach him, and he's like not wearing his shoes, his hair's all down and everything. Feng Xin's acting like a mother hen, being like, Xi Lian, put some shoes on. Like, he's just, that is one picture that these chapters do show us. The first of the two is when Feng Xin is when Xi Lian's like on top of the bed, right? Let me find it. I'll find it real quick. Yeah. He's on top of the bed. It's really cute. He's like on top of the bed, and he has his shoes off, his hair's down. You see Mu Qing down in the corner there holding the robes, looking at them. And he looks all soft and meek, right? He looks kind of soft and meek. And then you have Feng Xin with the sword being like, Your Highness, put some shoes on. It's super cute. Like, it's very, very cute. I was like, aw. But yeah, so that's chapter 60. They notice that something's missing, right? So that's chapter 60. Then we go to chapter 61. I'm probably going to have to flip White Raccoon over. It's just going to happen. I'm just going to at least get these chapters in here. So chapter 61 talks about that the red pearl earring is gone. So they're missing one of his red pearl earrings. Has gone missing. And this chapter is really fascinating. I liked this chapter a lot. Feng Xin says that they need to find it. He's like, we need to find that pearl earring. It's pretty valuable. We need to just check and see where it could be. And Xi Lian's like, well, if it fell in the streets, we can't find it now. It's probably been kicked off. And I do like that they talk about that the martial warrior god is non-gendered. They wanted to make sure it was kind of non-binary, that it could be either genders, because they established that heavenly officials can swap genders. So I kind of like that, because it leads to believe that maybe the person playing the God-pleasing martial warrior could have been a woman. So they prepped for it either way, that they had like bracelets, they had all the garments, they had the crown, but they also had earrings. And it said that Shi Lian even got his ears pierced so that he could play the part. I'm sure Hua Chong's like, are you still able to wear earrings? Because that would be really cool if you could. Like Hua Chong's like, see, I got my ears pierced too, and now I can wear jewelry just like you did. It's like, oh my gosh. But Mu Qing offers to look for the pearl. I like that Mu Qing is like, no, I'll go look for it. I'm looking under the bed and everything. And Shi Lian offers to call for help. He's like, well, maybe we just get a search party going and do that. And then Feng Xin makes just an offhand comment. He's like, no, he's like, if we get too many people here, somebody might get handsy and just try to take the pearl and not give it back. And that, like, sets Mu Qing off. And he gets mad, snaps the broom, and runs off and tells Shi Lian, being like, you didn't keep your promise. And Shi Lian's like, no, don't, Mu Qing. So, yeah, so just Feng Xin, Mu Qing, he thinks that he's insinuating that he stole the pearl. He's saying, you think that I stole it because of what happened last time. And he storms off, and Feng Xin's like, I have no clue what he's talking about. Shi Lian's like, well, so about that. So apparently, Shi Lian lost one of the foils of his gold palace. Now, Shi Lian, this part I think is absolutely humorous. Shi Lian is a hoarder. Or maybe he's not a hoarder, but he had hoarder tendencies. Him being a scrap collector, it's the most ironic thing, because in the past we had the idea that when he came to the Holy Pavilion, when he came there, he didn't bring a lot. The book literally says, I did not bring a lot. Not a lot. I didn't bring a lot to the Holy Pavilion. You know, my mom just sent me with 2 carriages of books, 200 swords. He's that guy on the trip that you're going off with some friends and you're like, we just need a weekend bag. Just bring a weekender bag. Like, you need 1 change of clothes, like a pair of shoes, some underwear and pajamas, and you're fine. And he brings 5 suitcases. And you're like, we're gone for 2 days. Why did you bring all this stuff? So that's Shi Lian, 800 years ago. So yeah, he brings those with him to the pavilion, and then his mom says, well, that's not enough for him to keep himself busy, and she sends him with 20 servants and 4 more carriages of trinkets, of his favorite trinkets, right? And he tries to send them back to her. I do like the fact that we find that Shi Lian wants to send some of them back. He's like, Mom, this is too much. Here, you need to take some of these back. And in the process of doing that, one of the 108 golden palace foils was missing. And because he's the crown prince, everybody makes a big deal about trying to find it, right? And he's like, oh, well, you know, we'll eventually find it. And so the thing of it is they make this huge deal out of going on a scavenger hunt to find this gold foil, and it turns out that Mu Qing found it but didn't know what to do with it. He's like, I found this foil, but if I turn it in, it's gonna look like I stole it and I'm gonna get reprimanded, and I don't think that I deserve to get reprimanded because I didn't do anything wrong. So Mu Qing is kind of rightfully so, kind of a paranoid individual. He's kind of paranoid and wants to stay out of trouble. So he didn't know what to do with the foil. He's like, I don't know what to do. He's like, if I turn it in, I'm going to get in trouble. It's not going to be good. And so after a massive search, Shi Lian mysteriously calls it off midway because he ran into Mu Qing. And the thing about it is that Shi Lian, he did not know Mu Qing when this all came out. He didn't even know Mu Qing. Mu Qing was just a trainee there, just someone there at the pavilion working, and he didn't know Mu Qing, but after they bonded over tea, he confessed. So it was only after Shilian's kindness that Muqing ended up confessing that he found the foil, and he's like, I don't know what to do with it. I'm gonna give it back, but he's like, please don't think I'm at fault. And Shilian stood up for him. He stood up for him. He called off the entire search, pissing everybody off because they were like, we got everybody involved, and you just suddenly remembered that you didn't have it. What the hell? And so yeah, he just managed to call it off. It's really cute that he basically, Muqing, Shilian, he didn't know him personally, but after he was kind to him and they served each other tea, he just confessed. And what's interesting about it is that Shilian also makes the note. He also makes the note to Feng Xin. He's like, look, he says that with Muqing, people already disliked him. They already disliked him and they bullied him because he, was a lower class citizen to them in their minds. So he's like, they already did that. He's like, we're from different vantage points is how he says it in the book. We're from different vantage points and we have different roles, and the way that people look at us are different. So he's like, I didn't want him to get in trouble. And so he makes Feng Xin promise that he will never say a word of it to anybody else. He's like, now you know the secret. You can't say a word of it to anybody. And Feng Xin's like, well, but, it's kind of his fault. He should have given it back as soon as he found it. Feng Xin doesn't get it. Shilian kind of gets why Muqing is the way that he is, but Feng Xin can't see past that. Feng Xin is so black and white, absolute. And Shilian has a little bit of wiggle room there, right? That he just can't understand why Muqing would be that way. And I love that Shilian says, if you do tell anybody, you'll be cursed to never find a wife. And Feng Xin's like, okay, I guess I'll go along with it then. So I'm like, did Shilian just literally... I'm still curious about Feng Xin's fear of women. We don't get the fear of women, but we get the idea that he will be cursed to never find a wife if he tells anybody about Muqing. We don't get the fear of women established. That's not even brought up in this. So I don't know when that's going to happen. I don't want to know. I want it to be kind of kept a secret. But basically, he's sworn to secrecy. But what's kind of fascinating about this is that Shilian starts out going to the Holy Pavilion with all of this stuff, with the most luxurious items, all this just excess, right? And then we cut to 800 years later, and he's dumpster diving. So it's just showing that MXTX is building up how privileged and spoiled he was, and how Shilian was still somehow, amidst all the spoiling and privilege, turned out to be a decent person. Unlike Qirong. Well, we'll talk about Qirong. But unlike that, he turned out to be a decent person, and then he lost everything. And then I just love the irony of him going from having 6 carriages, 20 servants, and all of this stuff at his disposal to just rummaging around trying to find scraps. It's kind of cool. I like that. I like that comparison, right? That contrast. But basically, Shilian was like, I don't care. He's like, I came to the Holy Pavilion to be the best out of 3,000 people. He's like, I wanted to become the best trainee out of 3,000. And he's like, by the end of it, they're going to see that I'm a decent person and they're going to be friends with me. And then none of this will matter. Muqing's, the golden foil thing, they'll forget about it. And what happens is that they forget about it. Shilian ends up proving that he's the best one there. He ends up becoming super friendly. They all like him. And it ends up working out in Shilian's favor. And Feng Xin doesn't want to cut any slack with Muqing, but Shilian does point out how he's already been bullied and he just keeps his distance from people to avoid being hurt. He says that Muqing, I'll tie him back down here. He says he keeps distance to avoid being hurt. And we literally see that later on. Happen with him. We literally see it happen later on with him. My computer shut down for a second, so I had to reboot it. But we literally see him later on avoid being hurt, physically do it. But Shilian's establishing that, his personality, his moodiness, it's understandable. It's just part of his character, and his upbringing's kind of helped lead him to be this way. And Feng Xin just kind of doesn't get it, right? And so then we have the whole talk about, I kind of skipped it in the reaction, and when I went back and read the chapter, I was like, Oh! But there's this line that Shilian says that is not like his character at all anymore. That I was like, oh shit, this has changed a lot. Where he talks about the rock speech. The rocks versus the jades. Right? So as 16, 17-year-old Shilian, he says that there are people in this world who are nothing but rocks in my eyes. But you, he says, rocks are everywhere. But you are all jades who are hard to come by. And he says that in martial arts, the only one who is a jade, and to me, are you and Mu Qing. And he's like, and the ones that are destined to shine. And Shilian's like, it's my job. I must let you shine. And so I was like, oh my God, because that's not how he thinks things now. What Shilian's saying in that moment is he's like, well, yeah, there's ordinary people all around me. Like, everywhere's ordinary people. Like, who cares about them? But you all are special, and I need to make sure that you guys stand out because you're better than everyone else. I'm like, that's not how Shilian thinks today. No, it is not. That is a privileged statement, right? That is a privileged point of view that everybody else is ordinary, but because I think you're special, you need to stand out. It's like, oh my God. And he makes the comment with that I don't believe goodwill brings bad returns. So goodwill brings no bad returns. It kind of makes more sense now why, when we saw the OVA in the Donghua, Shilian was telling Huachong, he's like, yeah, all that stuff I said when I was younger, I was an idiot. He's like, I didn't know what I was saying. And I'm like, oh my God. He's like, and that's something Shilian laments throughout this whole story so far, is he's like, why is it when people try to do good, bad things happen? That's something that Shilian struggled with this entire series so far, is that he just doesn't understand. And Function kind of takes the whole rocks and jade comment, and he's like, well, he's like, as long as you know what you want, he's like, I guess what you do is your business. He's like, I don't quite agree with what you just said, but as long as you're just doing what you want, I guess it's your choice, whatever. And so then they walk among the fruit trees at the very end of the chapter, and I really liked this, was that they talk about how the fruit trees are filled with pearl-like cherries. Filled with pearl-like cherries. And so I think that ties exactly back to the rocks versus the jades. At the end of the day, the pearls and the cherries, they look exactly the same. They are not the same, in fact. They are different, but they look the same. And they are both precious to different people for different reasons. And on the one hand, you have the precious pearl that Shilian believes is like, it's a gemstone that he thinks is valuable, and he's associated value with it, so we have to find it. But then you have the precious cherries that we see Mu Qing give out to the children later. The children, they don't give a shit about that pearl. They care about those cherries because it's food and they need it to survive. So you have the pearls and the cherries, something that looks totally identical, but yet is valuable just to different people in different ways. And it's like, not one is not better than the other. They both have value, and they both are needed by people for different reasons. So I feel like that's MXTX at the end, because those two metaphors are like right after one another. So I feel like they're connected. I feel like MXTX is pointing out that, Shilian at this point in his life thinks that there is a difference between people, and that there is a hierarchy of value that we give people, which is not too unlike what his father thinks, but Shilian just kind of, it's tweaked a little bit, right? But MXTX is saying that Shilian right now, at this point in the story, believes that some people are more important than others. But at the end of the day, like the cherries and the pearls, they all look the same, and they all have value to different people in different ways. So is one really better than the other? And the answer is no. But Shilian can't see that yet. So I loved that. That whole metaphor with the cherries and the pearls. Love it. It's great. But then we go to chapter 62. Yeah, chapter 62. I'm definitely flipping whiteboard Kunover after this one. I don't think we'll fit any more than this. But yeah, so we get to chapter 62, and basically they hear something that sounds like Mu Qing. They went to go look after Mu Qing because he ran off because he thought that Feng Shen thought that he stole the pearl. And we find that there are 4 to 5 white-robed guards. And what are they doing? Well, they are bullying Mu Qing. And Zhu is among them. And I think it's interesting to note that it seemed like Mu Qing just kind of gave up at this point. He was just like, he needed to get away. And instead he was collecting cherries to take back to his mother. So we find a little bit out about Mu Qing's mom. We find out that Mu Qing's mom, his mom was a seamstress. And then she could no longer work. And Mu Qing brings her food and money. Which is really nice. Like, Mu Qing, he knows his mom can't work anymore, so he wants to, like, provide for her. Which seems like kind of a contrast, again, with Xi Lian and his own mom, right? So he's trying to do that. And the thing about it is, they kind of establish in the chapter that there's no rules saying that you can't take food from the trees. There's not like a sign that says no trespassing. There's not a sign that says don't pick the fruit. People do it all the time. But the people picking the fruit are bringing it to the Holy Pavilion to give to the people there. And they make a comment saying that, yeah, there's no rule saying you can't take food outside the pavilion and back to the town. But it's kind of in poor taste. And you shouldn't probably do that. But Mu Qing, he's not doing it for himself. He's doing it for his mom, right? And so Xi Lian butts in and he basically, you know, takes responsibility. He's like, oh no, I told him to go gather the fruit. You guys got a problem with that? And then everybody's like, nope. And they back off. And what I like about it is that Mu Qing, he's like, he says he's getting it from Mu Qing. And he tells Mu Qing later on, he's like, use me as an excuse. He's like, we're getting little tiny shades of Xi Lian taking responsibility and saying it's okay if he's used as the excuse. He tells Mu Qing to make him the excuse. Like, put the burden on me. We're getting little tiny shades of Xi Lian saying, put the burden on me. We'll have it come back again in the later when Qirong and the whole village has the chaos. And Xi Lian's like, let me take responsibility. So we're seeing shades. We're seeing shades of the present. It's like the little seedlings are planted right here with him in this chapter, right? And Mu Qing, I like that he's like, why do you always show up at times like this? Mu Qing is like, why do you want to help me? He's like, why are you helping me? It's not that Mu Qing doesn't like it, but he's tsundere, and so he's like, I wish you'd just let me do it myself. Why are you helping me? Blah, 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 blah. And so then they decide, Xi Lian's like, all right, well, go take your mom this fruit because we're going to go down to the palace. I'm going to go visit my folks. I'm going to leave the pavilion, head down to the city, go to the capital, see my family, see what's up. It's been a couple months, see how they're doing. And who shows up at the damn gates to pick them up but Qirong and his 16th birthday gift, right? I feel like this is Qirong's Sweet 16 gone wrong. It's basically this. But Qirong shows up with this golden carriage. As soon as we saw that he had a whip, I was like, oh, that's Qirong. As soon as we said somebody was cracking a whip, I'm like, oh, Qirong showed up. And he has. He shows up to take Xi Lian to the palace. I love that he calls Feng Shen and Mu Qing two shitty lowlifes. He's like, you're not invited. Only Xi Lian can get in the carriage. And Xi Lian manages to convince him, and he drives like a madman. Qirong drives like a 16-year-old kid that just got his license but didn't go to driver's ed. Like, he drives like a madman, like knocks over stalls, goes crazy, like the carriage nearly flips over, he nearly kills people, and Xi Lian takes like Feng Shen and Mu Qing to take over. And Xi Lian threatens to take the coach away. And Qirong is like, but it's my birthday gift. Auntie gave it to me. Qirong is so... Qirong. It all makes sense. It all makes sense at this point. It really does. Like, it all makes sense why Qirong is the way that he is. He is a product of his environment. That's something that's probably good to know, is that Qirong is very much a product of his environment. And it is a combination of the product of environment and nature over nurture. it's like the worst of both worlds, right? And we'll talk about that in the last chapter with the queen when she's lamenting why he's like that. It's like, no, he was born this way, but it's like the worst case scenario in both situations. He was born with this awful attitude, and it's been cultivated in the worst way possible and in the worst settings possible. So we'll talk about that throughout these chapters. But yeah, Chi-Rong just shows up, and they take it to there, and they establish that Shanla is a kingdom of excess. We established that a few chapters ago, and we get proven here. They love gold, they love gems, they love beauty, they love music, and they love art. And Mu Qing is terrified of being in the palace because he probably thinks, like, Mu Qing is, like, looking around like, I don't want to break anything. And he's just, like, shuffling through, like, I don't want to touch anything. I don't want to break it. I won't be responsible for it. And so inside the palace, we have his mom, who has a very well-maintained appearance, which is the irony of all ironies because she was well-maintained even in death until Chi-Rong ruined it. And so she keeps company by being with Chi-Rong, which is kind of sad that she's had her nephew keep her company all this time, right? When Xi Lian's away. And again, Xi Lian has to be told to visit his parents that hadn't seen him for 2 months. Taking it for granted, right? And she had been longing to see him, right? So that's chapter 62. And so yeah, we need to flip Whiteboard Kun over. Old chapter 63. So yeah, chapter 63. There's a lot going on in this chapter for sure. First of all, we go back to the whole cherries conversation, right? And the idea that the queen has been using cherries as like a facial. There's that conversation there because she talks about using the cherries like for her facial, where she was like, oh, she's like, I heard this thing like on QVC where you just crush up these cherries, you make a balm out of it and put it on your face. And she's like, it kind of didn't work. So, I mean, I'm just going to throw this away. You want some of this? It's not worthy for you to drink it though. And so Xi Lian feels really uncomfortable in this moment because Mu Qing is standing right there. And he knows that for Mu Qing, just the idea of getting some cherries for his mom to eat is a luxury. And here the queen just smushed him up and was like, that was a bad idea, never mind, and pitches it. And so there's this idea that Xi Lian has come to understand his privilege and how that looks to people that are not as privileged themselves. So Xi Lian, it's granted that Xi Lian understands. He understands the privilege of his position, right? He understands the privilege that position has granted him. It's like, okay. And so he felt uncomfortable for Mu Qing, and he knows that Mu Qing had been bullied for picking the fruit and that his mom, like, could barely get some. But then we don't have to worry about that long because Chi-Rong butts in and they start talking about the parade, and Chi-Rong is like, oh, well, this, because the queen brings up that Xi Lian is going to be reprimanded for causing the stir at the parade. She's like, oh, I wish the Goshi wouldn't get onto you. And Chi-Rong is like, well, it wasn't Xi Lian's fault. And at first you're like, oh, okay. No, it was Hua Chong and Mu Qing's fault. It's like, oh God, no. He's like, oh, this was all Hua Chong's fault, actually. He says it was Hua Chong's fault, not Xi Lian. And he calls Hua Chong a little fiend. And I love that Xi Lian's like, who are you calling little fiend? Like, you know, I'm very like, you're one to talk calling the kettle black. And Xi Lian, he's like, no. But here's the thing. Xi Lian did not correct him in that moment when he called Hua Chong little fiend. He didn't correct him. And the mom laughed about it. Did not discipline him at all. And Xi Lian introduces Mu Qing to his mom. His mom, who we find out likes Feng Shen, says that Mu Qing looks very surprisingly gentle, but he must be good with a sword, so seems like a decent guy. And Xi Lian's like, yeah, he's great with a sword. And then Chi-Rong throws the cup of tea at his face. And Xi Lian's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm putting this guy in his place, this impudent servant, saying that Mu Qing should be ashamed for stealing the spotlight from Xi Lian. And that Xi Lian, basically Xi Lian just picks up Chi-Rong and he's like, Feng Shen, take care of this. And he's like, we're not going to listen to this right now. But he tells him he's like, don't let Chi-Rong hit anyone. Like this has happened before. And Xi Lian tells Chi-Rong that he needs to not be so cruel and that he's going to take away his carriage. And that's when Chi-Rong gets mad. He's like, well, it was Auntie's birthday gift to me. Like, I asked for that carriage. And he throws a fit and runs off. So yeah, so Chi-Rong thinks that Hua Chong should not have interfered, and that Muqing needs to learn his place. And then he gets mad and runs off because Shi Lian threatens to take his sweet 16 right away. And then the queen points out that Chi-Rong wanted the carriage. He wanted the carriage to go and see Shi Lian. And then we tie back to that whole thing about good intentions should not get bad returns. And Shi Lian feels bad in that moment because he's like, well, dang it. He just wanted the carriage to come see me. So he had goodwill and I just yelled at him. But that's the thing, right? Yeah, Chi-Rong meant well, sure, good intentions. But his attitude and everything he was doing with it far outweighs the good intentions. Like, he may be doing lip service saying, oh, well, I wanted that carriage to go see you, Shi Lian. But then he does all these awful things with it. And it's like, well, that doesn't make it okay. You can't just do all these bad things and be like, well, I meant good. And like, no, that's not how that works. And so it's fascinating seeing seeing his logic behind everything in this. It's fascinating. And so Chi-Rong says that he begged for the carriage so he could come see Shi Lian. And Shi Lian points out that what he needs, Shi Lian tries to be a mediator, saying that he needs a tutor. He needs a teacher and someone to refrain his anger. He needs anger management and a tutor. Someone to teach him how to drive the damn carriage and someone to help him refrain his anger. But with his temper, Shi Lian and the queen, they're kind of at a loss. They're like, we don't know what to do with him. He's kind of out of control. They're like, no one at the Royal Holy Pavilion would want him. Like, that place is a sanctuary, and Chi-Rong would just make it the worst place ever. No one would want to teach him. And I, like the queen said, he'd raise hell for sure. And I'm like, oh my God. The fact that he becomes a ghost is so obvious now. I'm like, yeah, no, he'd become a ghost. Of course, out of sheer spite. Absolutely. I'm curious how he died. Now I'm thinking we're going to find that out about Chi-Rong. I'm guessing we're going to find that out. Probably. But yeah, she's like, oh, he'd raise hell for sure. And they realize that they just don't know. They don't have an answer. So they just let it go. They don't discipline him. They don't think about it. They don't say, we'll reconvene later. They're just like, well, we tried. I'm like, oh my God. So later that evening, Shi Lian goes along with Muqing. And we get this establishment that Shi Lian has spent more and more time cultivating. And his dad doesn't really care about that. And we'll learn more about that in chapter 65. But the mom misses him. So we get that established, and that Shi Lian, he goes with Muqing to his neck of the woods, to his block, right? There's a really, really, really cool moment here that is talked about, and function is there as well, right? There's a really cool thing that's talked about here that I absolutely loved. Again, I didn't say it in the reaction, but when I went back and read it, but it's the idea that there's this opulent, tall, red gate, and then a street over from the palace are the slums. And symbolically what that represents, that they are a street away from each other. And it sounds weird, but you know what I thought about? I don't live close to St. Louis in the United States. There's a city in the United States called St. Louis. It's exactly the same way. If you've ever go downtown in St. Louis, it's really crazy because you'll be going down a street in St. Louis and there will be $1 million houses, like the most beautiful ornate brick houses with this beautiful 1920s architecture. It's gorgeous. You go one street over and it's an impoverished community. And there's like people that are poor that are total opposite of that. One street over. And that's it. And there's no like rhyme or reason for it. It's just the way that it is. And it's really sad, right? It's really sad. And so, and it's almost like there's such districting where they just, the rich people keep to themselves at this part of town. They're like, oh, no, you go over here and this is your place. So that's very much what's being said in this chapter. And it's fascinating. And Shi Lian kind of understands it and says it, but then we don't really get any more insight into it. So I'm going to be curious as we go through these volumes and as we go with Shilian along his journey, because I feel like after Shanla fell and Shilian was demoted and started walking his 500-year journey before he gets to be the Goshi Feng Shen, I'm going to be curious to see what insights we get about things from Shilian's perspective. That's going to be fascinating. So I'm curious, but when they brought that up about the slums being right next to the palace, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. And so then we get all the little kids mooching. Mooching is a secret softie. And I know I just did this in a different color, but it's okay. He's a secret softie with the kids call him Gege. And he's brought them things before. Mooching's like Aladdin. Mooching's like Aladdin. He's brought them things, right? He's used to bringing them things in the past. And it's funny that he gives them cherries finally. He finally succumbs and gives the kids cherries. And what I love about this scene is that Feng Shen is just like, in the book it says that Feng Shen was surprised by this. He's like, I didn't think Mooching would ever give anything away to another person. Like, I thought he'd hoard it all to himself. And Shilian's like, I knew he would. Like, Shilian claims he understands Mooching, and he's like, no, I get it. No, he's a secret softie. He only has this hard exterior. Once you break through the layers, he's not that bad. He's okay. It's fine. And Shilian, this was another thing too, that Shilian, he's sad that he has nothing to give the kids because he doesn't carry sweets on him, which again, now Shilian in the present time carries the sweets on him. Like, he gives the sweets to Banyu and stuff. He carries the stuff with him because he knows that they're going to want it. So it's like Shilian learned from that moment, watching those kids being like, oh, I need to carry sweets with me so I can give him something. Because I like that he says he doesn't want to give him a coin, because it would make it seem like he's just like, okay, here's your money, now go away. Like, he's shooing them away. He doesn't want to be like that, right? So he wants to carry sweets. I'm like, that's so sweet. But anyway, Qi-Rong shows up. Like, Qi-Rong learns nothing. Qi-Rong, they established in the novel that the conversation with Qi-Rong and the Queen and Mooching and Feng Shen happened like in the early afternoon. And then later that evening, Shilian and Mooching and them go out into the streets to like visit his home. And so during that span of time that Qi-Rong had his fit, he had a bunch of guys go and track down Hua Chong, and they beat him within an inch of his life. They put him in a gunny sack, and he was dragging him behind a carriage. I cannot imagine what any of this is going to be like animated. I can't. I'm just picturing Hua Chong showing up in a golden carriage like a young whippersnapper being like, hop in, cousin Crown Prince. And then him showing up like in the dead of night. Like, I just could picture in my head like all the lanterns lit and there's this fire and there's Qi-Rong in this golden carriage with like a gunny sack tied behind him. And that's been hinted at from before. We knew that he did that from Shilian telling us that chapters prior. But Shilian realizing that there's someone in the gunny sack and him cutting the rope to save the battered child in it. Oh my God. And it's Hua Chong in the sack. So we have Qi-Rong showing up like a madman in the carriage for one final ride before it's permanently decommissioned, in the carriage with Hua Chong in the sack. Again, the fact that Hua Chong wants to kill him kind of makes sense. kind of makes sense. Can't say I blame him. And then, yeah, he's carrying him behind the carriage. And then Shilian cuts the rope to save him. And he grabs, the kid is in the sack. He grabs Hua Chong out of it. And Qi-Rong goes to whip the child in the head. He like goes to whip the child in the head. And Feng Shen stops him by breaking his arm. Oh my God. The funny thing in all of this is that Hua Chong has known these two, Feng Shen and Mooching, for 800 years. And he's just been tormenting them for 800 years with butterflies. He's been torturing them with butterflies for 800 years. And these two have no clue it's Hua Chong and that they met him as a child. And that Feng Shen saved him from Qi-Rong. Just what the hell? Oh my God. Oh my God. So yeah, he tried, and meanwhile, like Feng Shen Shi Lian's trying to console him, but he's like just basically hiding. He's adamant about hiding his face. He doesn't want Shi Lian to see his face. I guess it's not the human face disease because he doesn't, like, we don't see anything with it, or maybe it's not around them, but Qi-Rong gets his arm broke by Feng Xin, and basically Hua Chong is adamant to not show his face. Oh my God. It's kind of madness. It's kind of madness. So Qi-Rong like wants to punish Hua Chong for ruining the ceremony, and Shi Lian is pissed. At this point, Shi Lian, we start chapter 64, and Shi Lian is mad. Shi Lian is like, had enough. So chapter 64, basically Shi Lian is mad. He is very upset at Hua Chong. He's like, Qi-Rong. He's very upset at Qi-Rong. He's like, you can't drag someone during the street in the middle of the evening, in the middle of everyone. You can't do that. And Qi-Rong's like, well, he deserved to be punished. You ruined the ceremony. And so he's like, you didn't ask me if this was okay. And Qi-Rong tries to justify everything. And he points out Mu Qing's involvement. Mu Qing's like, leave me out of this. And Qi-Rong is upset that the carriage he worked for 2 years to get was confiscated. And he claims he tried to be of help, but he was discarded. He's like, Qi-Rong tries to claim that he was doing it for Shi Lian. And Shi Lian's like, no, you were doing it for yourself. He's like, don't tie my name to what you're doing. He's like, no, you were doing this all for yourself. Don't say that you were doing this for anybody else. He's like, no. He's like, you're avenging yourself, not me. And Qi-Rong's like, why is it wrong to follow you? And at this point, I thought it was interesting that Qi-Rong is like, why is it wrong to follow you? And it's kind of like, again, we're getting little shades of Shi Lian's character and how it develops. It's almost like Shi Lian in that moment doesn't want a follower, which is the irony of all ironies, because he's going to ascend in a short period of time and then get lots of followers. So it's curious that even at this point, as different of a character as Shi Lian is now from where he is in the present, there's still that shade of Shi Lian not wanting a follower. He's like, I don't want people following me. I don't want to be worshipped by someone. It's there, right? And so he doesn't say, like, instead he tells Qi-Rong, he's like, do not, he says, Shi Lian says to let me get this right, do not touch Hua Chong again. He doesn't. He doesn't after this. Nope. And I don't think he ever does again in his life. It's amazing, right? He says not to touch him anymore. And then that's when Qi-Rong goes to whip his head. And this is actually when he breaks the arm, is right up here. He actually breaks it in chapter 64. He stops by breaking his arm. And then Feng Xin realizes it was a mistake. He realizes that he just messed up. Because it's one thing, they say in the book, it's one thing to verbally reprimand Qi-Rong, and it's one thing to stop him, but to cause him physical harm is a big no-no. Is a big no-no. And so Shi Lian, this is again Shi Lian taking the blame. Shi Lian tells the city to put their grievances on him. He's like, I'll take responsibility for everything my dumb cousin has done. Just go ahead, lay it on me. I'll take care of it later. He tells all that as he rushes Hua Chong to the infirmary, right? And they established that Shi Lian's never really brought anyone to the infirmary. He's always been in pretty good health. He's never had to go there. So they're like, they seem pretty nervous that Hua Chong just shows up with him. But they basically figure out that he is not 7 or 8 years old. He is actually 10. So Hua Chong, aka Hong, which means red, which I love. It's tied to the maples. It's tied to him dressed in red. It's perfect. So Hong is 10 years old. So not 7 or 8, a couple years older. And that he has this look on his face like he's been possessed by the devil. He just stares at Shi Lian like he's enraptured. Like, because this is the second time in a row within like a few weeks that Shilian has saved him from death. Shilian saved him from the fall, and they came back and saved him again. So of course, Hua Chong is like, you're my savior. You literally saved me twice now. And Shilian doesn't realize just how much Hua Chong is attached. And he says he does not want anyone to see his face because it's ugly. Which is really sad. And he like won't move his hands, and they're like, well, we'll just have to work around him, and we can't do much. But what they do find out is that he had 5 broken ribs, a broken leg, and injuries that adults may not be able to handle. Like, this kid went through some trauma, right? And Shilian is furious at Qirong. He's like, he's this little kid. He is furious. And so then, I've still got so much to go. So then I took a lot of notes for chapter 65. A lot of notes for chapter 65, actually. So yeah. So, let me make sure I got that right. Yeah. So chapter 65, Shilian is, at the end of 64, Shilian is furious at Qirong. And we get that little subtle thing where Hua Chong looks away. He notices that Shilian sees him looking, and he looks away. It's like, come on, come on. So then we get chapter 65, and I'm going to keep it the same color, because I like this marker. It's dark. And so chapter 65, Shilian orders Hong to lie down and rest for a while, and he puts him behind the curtain. It's really cute because when his parents show up, you can kind of see the other image that we see for the chapter is right here, and I'll show you all an image of it. But it's basically Shilian talking to his parents and trying to defend Hua Chong. And there's a moment here, like I'll show you guys the image of it. Yeah. So you see the king and queen. The king looks like your stereotypical elder statesman. He's got the mustache and the shorter hair. It's all put up. The queen looks very regal. But you can kind of see, I'm going to show you that there. You can kind of see Shilian there. And you see Functions beside him. Way back in the corner back there. Way back in the corner, if you can see it. There's little tiny Hua Chong peeking from the curtains with his eye patch, with his eye all bandaged up. It's really cute. But yeah, Shilian looks great. But yeah, so he puts him behind the curtain, and then the king and queen show up. And Qirong argues for his innocence. And this part's interesting because Shilian starts out by saying, no, Qirong, you were in the wrong because Hua Chong was an innocent child that you drug through the town. Like, it looks really bad. And Qirong counters and says, that kid ain't innocent. He says that kid acts pathetic to you. But 5 to 6 of my lackeys could not catch him, and he bit them until they bled. Which, you could argue that Qirong is telling the truth there, but if those guys, if I was being chased by 5 to 6 people and I got cornered by them, I would probably try to bite my way out of that situation too. So I don't blame Hua Chong for trying to get away from that situation. Yeah, no, but he's telling Shilian, he's like, oh, that kid looks pathetic to you, but he's not harmless. He's not defenseless. And Shilian's like, this defenseless baby. And Qirong's like, he ain't defenseless. He can defend himself quite well. So, but the reason why he defended himself makes sense, right? But I do like that. That does kind of tie to Hua Chong in the present, though, because Hua Chong is kind and considered to Shilian all the time. But to everyone else, not so much, right? But the thing that gets the king and queen to get mad at Qirong is the fact that Shilian points out how Qirong's actions will be a source of gossip. He's like, well, this is going to be the talk of the dinner table, is Qirong driving the carriage through the streets and nearly killing everybody. And that, not the fact that like a child nearly died, not the fact that this child was dragged through the streets to near death, that part we can overlook, but our reputation could be tarnished? Oh, no. That's kind of like the way that they go. And the way the king says he tells Chi-Rong that he's going to go to a doctor. He's going to have the car taken away, the carriage taken away, and he's going to get grounded for a month. That's it. That's it. He like nearly kills a kid, nearly injures several dozen people, but he's going to like have the doctor check your arm out, put it in a sling, go sit in your room for a month. You don't get to go outside and hang out with your friends. And that's it. And Xi Lian is like, you're just going to let him go reflect on his actions? And Chi-Rong says he doesn't care. Chi-Rong is that kid that at age 16 got arrested for a DUI, and then his parents were like, did you learn your lesson? We're going to ground you for a month. Hope you learned it. And Chi-Rong's like, I guess. Where's the vodka? Like, that's how he acts, right? And so he doesn't care. And he knows that the carriage was going to be permanently detained anyway, so he just took it out for one last joyride. Like, it doesn't matter to him. And the queen is really sad that he doesn't have a repenting heart. That there's no repenting. No repenting from Chi-Rong. Nope. And Xi Lian says that his discipline should be stricter. He's like, 1 month of grounding is not enough. And Chi-Rong at first is kind of shocked by that. Like, my cousin Crown Prince, why are you suggesting that? But then he goes along with it. But then he's like, well, fine. I guess I do deserve greater punishment, but just so you all know, Feng Shen broke my arm. Like, he just has to have the last word, right? He has to have the last word. He's like, he tells everybody that Feng Shen broke his arm. He throws him under the bus because he knows what's going to happen. He knows exactly what's going to happen. And so Feng Shen, the king, goes to him, and the king says, you are a servant. Why did you do that? He's like, you're a servant. That's not good. And Xi Lian stands up for him. Xi Lian's like, look, it was not his fault. Chi-Rong was being ridiculous and was going to attack me. Feng Shen just protected me. And so Feng Shen, we find out, listens primarily to Xi Lian. Feng Shen serves Xi Lian over the king, which is pretty impressive that he doesn't bow to the king. Instead, he stands for Xi Lian, which is great. And Xi Lian's like, Chi-Rong's at fault. He protected me, so why does it matter? But the king says, and this is why I want to tie to like the whole heavenly realm and everything. The king says, according to him, that servants and masters are always separate. And they have separate standards, is what he says. And so he says that for the masters are always in the right. He makes a thing saying like, well, if I gave this young man 1,000 lashes right now, or 100 lashes or whatever, nobody would question me because I'm the master and he's the servant. And that's just the way things are. And it kind of reminded me in a way of the heavenly realm and the mortal realm, because the mortal realm and the ghost realm are all in the same area. They're all the same. There's not a delineation in the ladder between the ghost realm and the mortal realm, but the heavenly realm sits above it. So it almost seems like there's this master and servant relationship where the servants or the mortals are always going to be in the wrong compared to the heavenly officials, and the heavenly officials are always going to be in the right. And it's that comparison between the king's speech and that, but it's also between like Junwu and Xi Lian, where Junwu is like, well, I'm the heavenly emperor, I'm the master, you're a heavenly official, but you're below me, so I'm always going to have the better word. And it's like, whereas Hua Chong's like, nah, we're equal. There is none of this master-servant business. It's a cool comparison, it really is. And Xi Lian, he's just flabbergasted, and the king says that because Chi-Rong is royalty, he cannot be disobeyed or offended. And that's just like, Chi-Rong knows this. And he tells Feng Shen, he knows this, and he knows that the king goes by the system. And he tells Feng Shen to break his own arm and kowtow 3 times before him. Like the biggest insult. And Xi Lian says that's just ridiculous. He's like, I'll do it myself. He's like, if this means that much to you, I'll break my arm and kowtow before you instead, because this was not Feng Shen's fault. And we go through this. What's interesting is that MXTX talks about sons and fathers, right? Talks about sons and fathers. And the idea that they start out by idolizing that the sons start out by idolizing the father, then they grow up to question them and their ways of thinking, and then they cease to acknowledge one another. And I was trying to think in that moment back to Modao Zushi. I was like, we don't have, without spoiling anything, there's not a lot of father-son relationships that get development in Modao Zushi. There is one in particular, and it does not end well. So maybe that's what MXTX is saying. But I thought that was interesting, like this interesting commentary. We don't get a lot of that in Modao Zushi, so I thought it was kind of fresh and new. I liked it. But basically, Shi Lian, he started out as a kid not thinking about, what his father had planned for him. He talks about how his father, he doesn't like his father. He doesn't like his father's plans for him. He says that my father had my entire life planned out the moment I was born because I was the crown prince. And when I was a kid, I didn't think much about it because I was a kid. You don't think stuff about that. But he's like, the older I got, the less I liked it. And he's like, I suddenly, especially he says that one thing he does not like is that he doesn't like the idea of the royal prestige. He doesn't like the idea that like Chi-Rong can get away with everything because he's Chi-Rong, which is kind of cool because it translates to him now. Shi Lian does not care about if you're royalty or not. Like Shi Lian right now doesn't care about any of that. And so it kind of ties back to his roots here. But he said he disagreed with his father. And the queen hates them at odds. The queen hates seeing the two of them against one another. So that's why Feng Xin decides to break his own arm. Like they're having this squabble. Shi Lian is like, I'm going to do it. And the dad's like, I don't care. And the queen's like, why can't we all just get along? And Feng Xin breaks his own arm in that moment. And it's like he just breaks it. He just is like, nope, it's problem solved. And Chi-Rong in that moment, when Feng Xin breaks his arm and he's sitting there like sweating on the ground, and Chi-Rong's like, what took you so long? I was like, oh my God! Like Chi-Rong, oh my God. Him in this flashback is amazing. And Shi Lian's really sad about this, but Feng Xin tells him, he's like, look, your mom, she has enough to deal with. She didn't like you guys bickering, so I just solved the problem. So then she didn't have to deal with it. And Shi Lian's kind of like, I know my mom has problems. He's like, but I wish you didn't do that, right? And so Shi Lian looks at his mom and he's like, look, if you can't handle Chi-Rong, you need to lock him up because it's not getting any better. And we find out his backstory. So we find out the backstory with Chi-Rong. And the thing with Chi-Rong is that his mom and his aunt were very close. They were very close. And then his mom, while she was young and immature, she eloped with one of the bodyguards. Tale as old as time. So she sowed her wild oats. She ran off. She left a good engagement to go run off with one of the bodyguards. She was young and impetuous. But the bodyguard turned out to be a terrible person. So they basically lived in a shack. And he turned out to be abusive and violent. And what do they say here? He turned out to be a drunk. And after Chi-Rong was born, he abused her more. And she took it until Chi-Rong was 5 years old. And then she ran with him. And the sad thing is that it was such a scandal because she left the palace to go be with the bodyguard that she couldn't just immediately go back to the way that things were with Chi-Rong. And she became depressed and withdrawn. And they established that the only thing she really cared about was her son. Chi-Rong was the only person that she cared about. And so she took care of him. And apparently there was an upheaval, though. There was this upheaval, and she died saving Shi Lian's mom. So the mom kind of owes Chi-Rong, because she owes her mom, she owes her sister. Her sister saved her life, and her only request was that her mom, Shi Lian's mom, take care of Chi-Rong. And she's like, that's what I gotta do. And you kind of understand a little bit where she's coming from, where she's like, as far as discipline goes, she's like, I can't be too strict because then it'll seem like I'm abusing him. I'm not his mom. I don't have that right. But if I'm not strict enough, then it's like it is now, and he's just spoiled and rotten. And she laments that she's like, how can this be? How can two kids that were raised the same way turn out so different? And I would argue that there is a thing. You know, Shi Lian was from birth raised by the queen, right? Not Qi Rong. Qi Rong was at least 5 or 6 before then. You develop a lot those first years of your life, between your 5 and 6 year, between your 5th and 6th birthday. You develop a lot. Lots of things happen in that developmental process. So Qi Rong was already a lot different than Shi Lian when she started raising him. Already a lot different. And it's kind of that nature versus nurture sort of thing too, with that Shi Lian's dad and Qi Rong's dad were very different, and genetics play a part in it. And Qi Rong just didn't have a good upbringing. His dad had a lot of problems, it seems, and so that probably affected him. And so yeah, it's just a different story. It's not the fact that her raising them the same at the end of the day was not going to change much, because there was already so many other factors at work here. But yeah, so then after all this has happened, after Qi Rong's been taken away, Feng Xin has a broken arm. Mu Qing, it's worth noting that Mu Qing, whenever Feng Xin gets his arm broke, Mu Qing kind of looks at him gloomy from the sidelines, like I want to say something, but I don't want to get involved, but I don't like that you got your arm broke, but I also don't know what to do in this situation. So he's kind of unreadable. But when the king called Feng Xin out, Mu Qing took a step away, like 2 steps away, being like, I ain't part of this. Don't punish me, sort of thing, which speaks a lot for his personality. But yeah, then Shi Lian remembers, oh yeah, there's a kid here, and goes to Hong. And he asks where he's from, and Hong says, I have no home. I have no home. And Shi Lian's like, oh, he's like, well then maybe you can come to Mount Taiseng with us. And right as he says that, Mu Qing is like, he's lying. So the question is how? Why? What? What do we do with that? What do we do with this? I don't know. I've talked for like an hour and a half just about these chapters. So yeah, it's so fascinating, these chapters that delve into Shi Lian's past, because we're getting, and this is just 800 years ago. This is just the foundation. We've not gotten into the calamities. We've not gotten into his ascension. We've not gotten into any of that. We're just barely into this book. Barely in. We're barely into this. We're not even to the ascension. We're not even to the calamity. We're not even to his demotion. We're not even to anything. We're just barely into this. And I'm like, oh my God, my brain almost hurts because it's so much. But there's so many ties to Shi Lian and how much he's changed over the years. But you see shades of it starting even from the beginning. You see the shade, like the seeds from the beginning are there. They just not necessarily been planted. And seeing the comparison of Shanla at its height, of its excess, and seeing how that excess has shaped people like Qi Rong, and then seeing how Qi Rong ends up, and then seeing how Shi Lian ends up, and seeing like all the thematic things taking place here. It's just bonkers. So as I'm recording this, I'm hoping to get comments from part 15 and part 16 over on or part 16 and part 17 over on Patreon. Or this is part 17. So I'm hoping to get comments, if I can talk, from chapters 54 through 57 on YouTube and 58 and 59 from Patreon before I do the last set of chapters, which will be next week. So I'm hoping to get some comments on those chapters before I do part 18. And then when I do part 18, then we'll also do the song reaction as well. And so I anticipate that I'll get some comments for part 18, but the majority of the comments from like this video and the next video will come alongside when we start volume 3. So there's that. But I'm luckily only going to have to wait like 4 or 5 days before I read part 18 because I can't wait. I can't wait, and I've exhausted Whiteboard Coon, so what can we do? But these chapters, this story is incredible. And I honestly, when I saw a flashback chapter, I didn't know what to expect. And this has exceeded already all of my expectations. Like, did not see any of this coming. Didn't see any of it coming. And I don't think I'll see any of the rest of the story coming, or at least I hope. So thank you all for not spoiling me. Thank you so, so much. I hope that the reactions are worth it, because I'm having the time of my life reading this, and we only have this tiny little portion of volume 2 left, finally. And then we can start volume 3. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I will be back very soon with the last chapters 66, 67, and 68, the last 3 chapters of volume 2 of Heaven Official's Blessing. Bye.